All right. Anna Marquez, today is June 20th, 2013. Oops. What is your name?
My name is Anna Marie Marquez Ruiz.
Why did the parents select this name for you?
My mother told me that she just liked the name. She liked the name, and that's why she named me that. There was no specific reason.
Did you have a nickname?
Yeah, I had a few of them. Well, my uncle used to call me niggers when I was little.
Which uncle?
Mole.
What?
He used to call me niggers, and my aunts got kind of upset with him. They didn't want him to call me that. Well, I was darker than the rest of the kids, you know.
But they use it just as a sign of affection.
Yeah, I never thought of it as being derogatory.
Yeah. Any other ones?
When I went to California, all my friends called me Cheeky.
Did you have one in high school?
No.
No, I don't think so.
No, not really.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Morenci on December the 4th, 1947, around noon. 12 o'clock noon.
Okay. Who were your parents?
My parents were Esther Morales Marquez and Edward Garcia Marquez.
How did your family come to live there in North Clifton?
Well, you mean how did my mom and dad end up in North
Well,
Clifton?
let's start with your grandparents.
Well, my grandfather's father already owned land. He owned land in Salomon and
This is from your mother's side.
on my mom's side, yes. You know, he owned land in Salomon and then San Jose, and there's another place I can never remember the name of the place where he had a farm. And then he owned land in Clifton. So he would travel between Arizona and Mexico, and every time my great-grandmother got pregnant, he would bring her either to Salomon or to Clifton to have her babies. So that all of my grandfathers, he and his siblings, were born in Arizona, and then when it became a state, they became citizens. My grandfather ended up in Clifton after he closed his farm down. I guess it wasn't profitable anymore, and he figured he could open some business or have a business in Clifton. And he had a couple of different businesses. And so he ended up moving to Clifton, and that's how he met my grandmother. My grandmother's family, I just found this out, they came from I don't know where my grandmother's mother was from. I think she was from Mexico.
You didn't remember the name? Who's your grandmother?
My grandmother was Manuela Ochoa.
Okay.
And her father was Jose Ochoa. And I believe that he came from the Pyrenees during the time that they were having an uprising when Franco let who was it? Was it the Russians that were torturing the Basque people?
That's in Spain. Yeah,
In Spain.
know.
It's a little strip of land between Spain and France. Anyway, I just found out that that's where they came from, and they changed their name. It wasn't Ochoa. My great-great-grandfather changed the name to a Hispanic name. And so he married an Indian woman from someplace in Mexico, and I really don't know how they got to Clifton, but they ended up in Clifton. And I never even knew. I never knew my great-grandparents. They were gone by the time I don't even know if they were alive after I was born. But I just know that little or that much about them.
Yeah, we all know the Marquez side. They came up, so I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
The
Marquez, yeah, we know the history of the Marquez. Well,
I
was told that my grandfather hopped a rail car
from Chihuahua.
From Chihuahua, and he came to Clifton to work. I was told that's how he got there. And I guess he met my grandma Chepa. She was already there. Her mother had brought her there. And well, I'm not sure if she was remarried to Don Luis Perea, but he was not my Grandma Chepa's father.
Right.
Her father had died, and they had been living in Santa Rita, New Mexico. Then somehow my great grandmother ended up in Clifton.
Grandma Dickey.
And when I looked on Ancestry.com, it said that Grandma Dickey was from Texas.
I don't know.
Well, it was a census that had been taken. So, I don't know.
Were you the firstborn in your family?
Yeah.
Your mom and dad?
Yes. And I was the firstborn of the Morales grandkids.
So you're the oldest cousin
I
of
am
all?
the oldest of the Morales
All the
clan.
Morales.
The kids my age.
Just like Irene is the oldest of all the Marquez.
Yes.
How old were your parents when you were born?
I believe Mom was 24 and Dad was 26.
Do you have any other brothers or sisters?
Yes, I do. I have a sister named Agnes, Tess, Marquez, Logan, and my brother Eddie Marquez, Edward Anthony Marquez. He's deceased. He died in 1996 from cancer.
And Agnes lives where?
Agnes lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. She's been there for quite a long time. David, her husband, he's her second husband, and they have a son. He's 28.
What's his name?
His name is David Russell Logan.
What type of relationship did you have with your brothers or sisters when you were growing up?
You know, we had a very good relationship. I always felt that I was there to take care of them. I always treated them very well. I cared a great deal about. I do know that my mother tells me a story, and I vaguely remember this. When I started playing with friends that I had in the neighborhood in North Clifton, Agnes used to follow me around, and she wanted to be with me everywhere I went. I would get a little bit upset with her, and I remember she was so small, and when she met Christina Sislavi, she couldn't pronounce Christina, and she kept calling her Titina. You know, and when I go play, she'd always say, I want to go with Anna and go play with Titina. You know, and that's basically what I remember, but...
How much older are you than Agnes?
Let's see. Almost 6 years. I'm almost 6 years older than Agnes.
And Eddie?
8 years.
8 years.
Almost exactly 8 years. Eddie was born on December the 7th.
Do you remember how many aunts and uncles you have on your father's side?
Yeah. Let's see, we have my Uncle Ike, my Uncle Ramon, my dad, and my Uncle Arthur.
And the aunts?
And then my Aunt Nellie and my Aunt
Really?
Delia.
How about your mother's side?
On my mother's side, it's my Aunt Herminia, my mother, my Aunt Teresa, then my Uncle Joe, and my Uncle Molly.
Tell me about your cousins. I know you probably got together more with your Morales cousins than your Marquez cousins, right? Or not?
Well, you know,
Depending-
my
because you lived
grandmother
over there
took
on
care
that side.
of us, of me. And so they all lived in that. It was a little area where there were 3 homes, and my grandparents were in one home. My Uncle Joe and his family were another, and my Aunt Teresa was in the back in another home. So we were all together. We played together all the time.
Yeah.
We were kind of raised together. And it wasn't until later on that Mom thought she could leave me at home after school that I stopped going out over there so often. But then another thing too was that the family, they got together a lot. And especially, you know, like on Sundays, and if it was a nice spring day, they'd get together at somebody's house and barbecue, and they'd take us and drop us off at the movies, you know, and leave us there all day. And then they'd come and pick us up, and they'd stay at home, and have a good time with each other.
Do you remember happen to know what your grandparents died of?
Well, my grandmother, it was basically old age.
Okay.
You know, she'd been through a lot, and she had breast cancer and beat it when she was about 74, I think. And she had her breast removed, and then she was fine. But then old age, you know, just and you know, my grandmother worked on the farm in the fields with my grandfather.
What was your grandmother's name again?
Manuela.
And your grandfather's name again?
Telesforo.
What?
Telesforo.
Okay.
They called him T.E. It was so hard to pronounce. Everybody called him T.E. And my grandfather died of old age too. He was 101 years old. He just said, I don't want to live anymore. And he quit eating, and he was dead within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. Do you know where your grandparents are buried?
Yes, they're all up at the Clifton Cemetery
With your parents?
where my mom and dad and my brother are buried. And I have a plot there too.
And me too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've already told my kids what I want. I want to be buried. The plot is below, right below my mom and my brother's graves. Mom and brother, my brother is down below and my mother is on top. They're in the same grave. And then my plot is right below them.
Yeah. Do you think there was ever a black sheep in the family?
Well, I've been told
Okay.
that there is. I guess it depends on how everybody views it.
All right.
I have to look at it that way because I only know what I've heard, what I've been told.
Okay, but nothing ever about you. Okay. No problem.
I truthfully know there was never a problem there.
Has anybody in the family ever had any unusual psychic abilities or
Yes.
special powers?
Yes.
Who?
My sister Agnes.
Oh, really?
Yes, and she and I have it with each other. I have a little bit of ESP, but hers is very strong. Hers is very, very strong. And she gets a lot of feelings, and I know that occasionally she will call me and make sure that I'm okay, that my family's okay, and she gets these strong feelings. I know she believed very strongly in St. Teresa, and she claimed that when she would pray to St. Teresa about something, that she could smell the roses that Teresa was delivering to her, that she actually could smell the roses.
That's Teresa.
St. Teresa de Avila. No, not de Avila. No.
Oh.
St. Teresa, she was called a little flower. She was from France.
Oh. When you were a child, did your parents ever read to you?
Yes, they did.
What, bed stories or?
You know, I don't remember. My mother, I think, did a lot of that with us, and it could be during the day, it could be in the evening because of the fact that she worked and she had strange working hours. But she did read to us, and I know I had a lot of little books. And I got to tell you, I remember this too. I don't know what got into me that I decided I wanted to be an opera singer. And my mother had bought me this little golden book, and it had music in it, little songs in it. And I would sit in her bedroom in front of her mirror. She had this big round mirror. In fact, Jamie has that dresser upstairs, and I would just sing my heart out. You know, I would close all the doors and just sing like I thought I was, an opera star. And I went through that for a while.
That's pretty cute. Were either of your parents actively involved in the community?
Yeah, yes, they both were. Mom, in fact, I think it was harder for Mom when she started working, but she was very involved with the Clifton Women's Club, which I did not realize until much later, that the women's clubs were segregated. There was a Mexican Clifton Women's Club and an Anglo Clifton Women's Club. And they used to do a lot of things for us. Do you remember
Sure.
that? You remember going and they'd have parties, Halloween parties and things like that. And I remember that we were taking dancing lessons, my cousin Belma and I, and Lucille and Sylvia Ruiz, and we would go perform for them when they would have different functions, and Roger Munoz would perform, and the Ramirez boys, Marty and Mondo. We did a lot of that together.
Yeah.
There and at the
You know?
the building, the CYO building, what was it called? The Youth Center.
Yeah, okay.
The Youth Center, we did a lot of that. And we performed for the union too, like when they would have strikes and things. But my mom was active in the Women's Club, and then my dad, they were active in the church. They did a lot of things with the Sacred Heart Parish. Before I get to my dad, I just want to say that I do remember that when I became old enough to go to dances at the center, Mom and Dad were chaperones. And I didn't care. I just wanted to go dance. I didn't care if they were there or not, you know. But they did a lot of that through the church. And then Dad, of course, was very involved with the union. And then he became involved with the city of Clifton. I know that he was a judge. What kind of judge was it?
City magistrate.
City judge, city magistrate, and then he was a councilman, and then he was a mayor. That was an interesting. I remember Feller Scott was a police officer, and oh my gosh, he used to wake my dad up at all hours of the night for all these different things that were going on that people would call in and say, you know, like, I've got cows in my front yard, you know, come and get them out, and things like that. That was, you know, that was kind of interesting. And then, I don't know if I should tell the story, but these two women got into a fight, and Feller Scott brought them in to my dad, and they had gotten into this tremendous cat fight, and every time that he asked him what happened, he couldn't get anything out of him because they were both jabbering at the same time. And so he finally got his gavel and hit the desk, and he said, "Put him in jail," until they calmed down.
There you go.
And they were people that we knew from North Clifton.
Yeah.
I forgot to say that he was extremely involved with the union. He was this business secretary for many years, and that was his passion. That and arguing grievances and going on negotiations. He really enjoyed doing that. He was good at it.
Well, I know he was. I remember hearing him saying a lot of the stories about the way they kind of started up and the way they used to.
Well, your dad was. My Uncle Henry, your dad, he was also very active.
Yeah, but the way they used to meet, and the Pete company would come and find them.
Oh yeah, they'd have to go up the river to meet.
Yeah, or somewhere else, yeah.
Like in secret. You know, that's so. I don't ever remember my dad talking about that, but you told me about that. But I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I'm very proud of the work that my dad did, and that your dad started too, and our Uncle Tom was involved, because I really think that they helped to tone down that feeling of segregation amongst the people, not just, you know, I don't want to just say the miners, because there were a lot of problems there. You know, Mexicans could not bathe in the same shower. They couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. They couldn't use the same Coke machine that a white person could use. Those were heavy-duty things, and those were things that they fought and won.
Yeah, I agree.
And that has to do with working conditions. Look, I know my grandfather worked underground. my grandpa Lika worked underground at one time, and I don't remember exactly how much money it was that he made, but it was like so horrible because he made so much less than an Anglo worker would make
For the same job.
for the same job. And they work, what, sometimes 13, 15 hours a day?
They only make like $2, $2.50 a day is what they made,
It was terrible.
supposedly. I know.
It was
It was terrible.
And I wonder, like, I don't know if Grandpa Liga was working when, for the PD or for the company, because I don't even know if it was called Phelps Dodge at that time, when his children were born. But they were born at home. They were not born in a hospital,
Right.
and neither were my mother or her siblings. I think maybe my uncle T.E. might have been the only one born in a hospital.
I think the one that used to do the birth was Maggie, right?
Maggie Roybal was a midwife.
Right.
Yes. I know my grandmother, she had a couple of the kids on the farm, and she told me the story about how she was out working in the fields in labor, and she would wait until the last possible moment, then she would send one of the kids or farm hands to the neighboring woman who was a midwife to come. She would come in the house, take a bath, and lay down and get ready to have her baby. And then they were in bed for 6 weeks. La dieta, la dieta.
Amazing.
I remember how she used to get after me about that.
What are the earliest memories of your house? Like describe rooms, furniture.
Oh gosh, yeah, I was just talking to Jamie about that last night. My mom and dad bought a home in North Clifton. It's supposed to be the, if not the only, but one of the only oldest homes in Clifton. And I have seen a picture of it
I should have brought that book.
where it's sitting up on the hill and there's nothing but tents all the way down to the river and across the river. It was a surveying picture and my sister took it. So I have asked her to give me a copy and I've never gotten one. But anyhow, they bought this home. It had been built by Scottish people. It had been passed down, different people owned it. I don't remember the name of the man that Mom and Dad bought it from, but it was an adobe house. The walls must have been at least 1.5 feet thick, and the ceilings were, they weren't as high as this, but they were high. And one of the things about that house was it was nice and cool in the summertime, but it was sure cold in the winter.
That's for sure.
But I remember we had no furniture. Mom and Dad had a table and chairs. I think I was 2 or 3 when we moved in. They had a table and chairs in the kitchen. They had a mattress on the floor in the bedroom. And I believe I had a little twin bed. And that was it. And I remember I had a tricycle, and we had wooden floors. And I would ride my tricycle because all of the rooms connected by doors, around and around and around in circles. I would ride my trike. And then after they got carpeting, I couldn't do that anymore. But I remember when we got our first sofa, and the chair actually that my mom bought that went with that sofa, we still have it. My son has it right now. I need to pick it up from him, and their sofa was green. It was kind of like an avocado green, and it was leathery. You know, it wasn't material. It was like, I'm not even sure if it was real leather, because if I was only 3, that was 1950. But I do remember the sofa. I remember the rocking chair, and boy, I thought we were in heaven because we had furniture.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Did you have of course you had a toilet, you never had to go outside to a house, huh?
No, we had a bathroom inside. I don't know what I would have done. I was going to ask you, did Grandma Chippa have an outhouse?
Yeah, we had an outhouse. We used to use it. We had a bathroom too. But when you were outside, you go to the outhouse. It was on top of the hill.
Really?
They had one out there, and Muggy had one right next to it.
You're kidding. I don't remember.
So we used to walk up the hill a little bit between my dad's house there and Marquez and
You
Rosa's house.
used it, huh?
Yeah, we used to use it.
Well, my grandparents had an outhouse at the farm. I
Yeah.
know I used that, my mother's parents. But I don't remember the Marquez's having an outhouse.
How about a telephone, radio, television? Do you remember any of those?
We finally got a phone, and it was one of those phones that you put on the wall, and like in the Waltons, you had to crank it up and get to an operator and pull the little...
The mouthpiece is different than the phone.
Yeah, earpiece off, and I know I had like a stool there so that I could answer the phone, and it was a party line. Oh my gosh, that was such a mess. You could hear what everybody was talking about, and we had some nosy neighbors. That's all I gotta say. And my mother, she was always saying, I have to be careful what I say on the phone because I know I'm being listened to.
How about a radio and television?
We had a radio. I remember we had a little radio, and it was, I think it was like rectangular shape, and I think it had like an oak casing. And we used to listen to the radio all the time because when Mom would take care of us and Dad would be working, because my father worked shift work too when he first started working. Then he started working at the Coronado Inn. He had 2 jobs. We would huddle up in the living room. She had a mattress that she would throw that was kind of quilty-like, and we'd turn the radio on and we would listen to, I remember Fibber McGee and Molly, and the Lone Ranger, and the Whistler. That was one of my favorite ones, the Whistler. Do you remember that one?
No.
Yeah, it was
like
a mystery. It was a mystery radio program. And then Mom would put the radio on because I used to love to watch my mom iron and watch her. I was fascinated because way back then, there were no dryers. Mom had a clothesline out in the back of the house, and I'd follow her out there while she hang clothes, and then she used to starch my dad's shirts, and I was always fascinated because she'd make this mixture and put the shirts in there. Do you remember that? And dip them in there and make sure she'd always say, your dad doesn't like a lot of starch. I have to be very careful. And then she would take the clothes down, and then they'd sprinkle them and roll them up and put them in a basket, and then she'd stand, by the basket and with her iron and her ironing board and pull the clothes out and start. There weren't even spray bottles.
What kind of iron was it?
It was one of those, I remember.
The one, the little heavy metal ones?
Yes, and it kind of
And you got
had
'em
a cord
hot?
or something going up on it. And it
Wasn't
had
it
one of
electric?
those remember those black cords with the black and white? They were like material
Almost like cloth, yeah.
covering it. And then she had a plate that she would put the iron on so that it wouldn't burn anything.
So it was electric then?
It was electric, but it was very old-fashioned.
How about television? Do you remember getting your first television?
I remember when we got our first television set, we were so excited. I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe, it was a black and white TV. We didn't have color. And then, I don't know, people started buying these screens. They said, if you put this on, it'll look like you're watching color. Do you remember that?
I remember
and they
that.
had like different shades, like what? Was it blue,
It really never
gold,
looked, it never really
and,
looked good anyway.
and
It was
red, and you'd put it on the top of the screen just so that you thought you were watching a color television set, which was silly because that really wasn't what it was. But in our mind, we thought we were. And we used to watch a lot of, I remember there was a lot of Westerns on TV. I remember watching Gabby Hayes, what's his name, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, all of those movies. I can remember watching those. They were on all the time. There were no cartoons.
Hit Parade.
Pardon me?
The Hit Parade.
Oh, the Hit Parade, that's right.
And you got to watch boxing.
And then Lawrence Welk, all of a sudden Lawrence Welk was there. And then I remember seeing Wayne Newton. He was coming out on a show and
Howdy Doody.
Howdy Doody. Howdy Doody. And it was so funny because Wayne Newton had red hair.
Yeah.
He was a redhead. And then he went to, as he got old, he went to Las Vegas and all of a sudden he had black hair, and I'm like, that's a real switch. And then he supposedly has Cherokee blood. Who knows? But I remember that TV set, and then it got to the point where it would go off and we'd bang it on the top to get it going. Do you remember doing that? And then the channel changer was all screwed up, and we'd be like switching back and forth and putting a piece of paper to tighten it up. Do you remember that?
Of course, you had remote control, right?
Oh, heck no.
You had to get up
my
and turn
hand. My hand. That's what I'm using right now upstairs. There's a little TV in my room, and I got to get up and change the channels.
Was your house heated?
Was it what?
Heated?
We had a heater. One wall heater, and then we had a heater. That thing was old. It looked like logs.
You had a fireplace too, right?
There was a fireplace, but Dad closed it off. He didn't want it. He was afraid we'd burn the house down.
I don't
So
blame him.
we had a couple of chimneys up there because that fireplace went through to my bedroom, and he shut it off. He had it sealed off so that we couldn't get in there.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
So
you have a refrigerator or ice box?
well, we called it an ice box.
But it was a refrigerator.
It was a refrigerator.
I know we all call them ice boxes.
Frigidaire, remember Frigidaire? And we thought we were in heaven. I never felt deprived.
No.
Never.
I agree.
We had food on the table all the time, 3 squares a day. I never felt that we were lacking for any of those things. I was happy.
Did you have a garden? Any fruit trees?
We had trees. We had peach trees in the front yard. And we had a huge peach tree out there. My dad had it knocked down. It was attracting a lot of black widows and things like that. And he was concerned because we played out there. He didn't want us to get bitten, so he had the tree knocked down. Then he had a retaining wall built eventually, and then he put a basketball net up there for my brother, and he put a cement slab there so they could play basketball, and all the kids from the neighborhood used to come up and play in my front yard, and there would be, if I was home taking care of the kids, say I was like maybe 12 or 13, there'd be like anywhere from 5 to 8 kids out there playing. And it's funny because my ex-husband, Jaime, I was already in high school and he was coming to my house to play basketball with my brother. Yeah. Yeah, he would come with his brother, with Renee.
You're older than him.
Oh yeah. I'm the same distance from Jaime. I'm about 5.5 years older than him, that I am from Agnes. And actually, they should have been in the same class.
What was it like growing up in the time period that you did?
It was great.
Mm.
I have some very good memories, wonderful memories. I have memories with the Morales family, with the Marquez family, because we did do a lot with the Marquez family too. I mean, I remember going on picnics up the river, up the trail, getting together at your house, at my Aunt Nellie's house. There was a period of time there when they all used to go to dances at the social club together, and they would leave us at my Aunt Nellie's house, and Gloria was she was in charge of everybody. I don't know where Irene was. I don't remember her being there.
She was always 5 years older than most of us. So
she was way ahead of us. And
I don't remember too much about her either.
But we used to, Gloria had everything, she had all these games planned for us. And when I say games, I mean, we didn't have board games. They were like, we'd go out in the front yard, and then sometimes we weren't allowed to go outside when we were alone there, but it would be you, and then myself and Agnes. I don't know if Eddie was there. I think he was too small. I think he had a babysitter. And Ray and Tommy, and then Gloria, Nellie, Peaches, Julie, and we'd all be there like playing games like Mother May I.
Cootie.
Cootie. Yeah, we did have a cootie game. I remember that. And then Kick the Can. We had to go out in the yard to play that
Hopscotch.
one out in the street. And then Hopscotch was another one. And what was it? Red Light, Green Light. Do you remember that? And then Gloria made this thing up that the whoever lost the game had to drink a glass of salt water. Oh my Lord, that was awful. That was pretty bad. It would make you sick.
Salt water with pepper, sometimes throw egg and mix it up in there.
I don't remember the egg, but I do know she would do these things. But I do want to say one thing. I really have fond memories of my Aunt Nellie because my Aunt Nellie loved kids.
Oh yeah.
She loved when we would go like on Easter Sunday and go have a picnic with the Marquez family. She would make up all these games. She'd have all these eggs ready. The golden egg, you got so money. The silver egg, you got so much money. And everybody got something. And then she would always be playing games with us. She had a lot of patience with us. And I have very fond memories of her because of that. Because she, and I remember my Aunt Delia would always say, "Ay, Nelly, yo no sé cómo lo haces." She'd just be sitting there, and Nelly would be there with all of us hanging all over. We'd play baseball. Do you remember playing softball? Like up the river? Mm-hmm. And
oh, yeah.
Then we'd get in the river, and, well, we thought it was swimming. We were actually wading. And it's interesting because we never thought of it as being dangerous.
I know.
Did you? I didn't.
No.
I don't think our parents did either.
Not like nowadays. Nowadays, you remember playing with or seeing mercury or quicksilver when you were a kid at school?
Yes.
And nowadays they close down. Now they close down the school. The hazard unit come in.
We
and
used
then,
to get it in little
little vial. They bring it in and you
vials.
put it in your palm of your hand. Let it
And
roll
I
around.
remember we'd put it in our hands and watch it swimming around, and we'd put like dimes and nickels and pennies
coat
in
it with
it
it.
to coat them.
Yeah.
I remember I had a ring that my mother bought me. I did that to my birthstone ring. She was furious. But, we didn't know any better.
Yeah, things were different. We didn't know any better to paint.
But, my grandma, Manuela, she was like a curandura. She cured people at her house, and she used to use mercury as part of her cure. She would use little drops of mercury. I remember that.
Then they used to.
That was interesting because she would have people bring their kids over that were sick. Empacho was the big thing. I don't know if you remember empacho, the word?
No.
Well, it's some kind of a blockage that you get in your stomach, and you get a lot of pain from it. And my grandmother would lay them out on the bed. The only reason I know this is because she cured me for it a few times. Is she'd rub an egg whole, but it was not boiled. It was a real egg.
Yeah.
Rub it all over. I don't know how she would find the spot. Then she'd crack the egg open, and it would just kind of settle there, and then she would put different things. I thought it was spices. And then she'd wrap you up. It was kind of like a diaper. And you had to keep that on for so many days. When that thing came off, that egg was cooked. I'm serious. And like ojo, she also cured infants and little children for ojo. I never remember seeing her do that, but she cured my daughter Jamie. At my house when she was about 6 months old.
For what?
Ojo.
What's that?
Well, they say that it's, kids get ojo because my grandmother always used to tell us, when you see a little baby like Mia, or between, when they're first born and maybe a year, and they're so cute you want to touch them.
Sure.
And you don't. There's some kind of a negative magnetic force that supposedly affects the child, and it makes them ill. And my grandmother would always tell her, if you see a child and you feel like that about them, you should always touch them. And touching them had something to do with not making them ill. All I know is that she cured my daughter Jamie from that, and that made me leave the room. All I know is I brought her an egg and a bowl of water, and she put this bowl of water with a cracked egg under Jamie's bed, and sat in there on a rocking chair with her and rocked her and prayed over her. I think she even anointed her with oil. And Jamie finally calmed down, and my mother brought her to my home because I was living in Stargo. And she came out and said she's asleep, just leave her alone, she's gonna sleep through the night, she'll be okay. She said, when you go in to check her in the morning, check the bowl and call me and tell me what you see. And the egg would be formed. The yolk was in the middle, and there would be like, it looked like an eye floating in water. Now, I saw this for myself, so I believe that it's true. But I think you have to be a believer too.
I think it does help. I agree with you. And the next one is, did you have any pets when you were a kid?
Yeah, we had dogs. I remember I had a dog named Frisky, and he died, and I got another dog, and I named him Frisky again. Didn't change the name. Then we had, we bought one of those little, was it a chicken or a duck at the fair or something? You know, they're babies. I believe it was a baby chick, and and Eddie named him Henrietta. It was a female, and she grew into a full, sized chicken. I don't know what happened to her, but her name was Henrietta. Now, I never liked cats. Mom would feed the stray cats in the neighborhood. And I would always say, why do you do that, Mother? And she said, because they eat. They eat all the bugs and all the mice and stuff. You know, we lived by a mountain, so we had scorpions, we had roaches, we had snakes, we had frogs, we had everything. And the good thing about it is that it taught me not to be afraid, how to deal with it, and not be. I have been bitten by scorpions many times, and never bothered me. I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not afraid of snakes. But then you need to know how to look at a snake too, by the shape of its head.
Yeah.
And I have seen a rattlesnake. And when I was small, here's another story. There was a creek behind my house, and I went over there to play, and I saw this beautiful lizard, and it was big, and I wanted to pick it up, and all of a sudden I heard my neighbor, Nechi, Padilla, Andres Padilla, he was my neighbor. He said, don't touch it, get away from it. And he came with a shovel and he killed it. It was a Gila monster. I didn't know what it was.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, later on we knew if you just left them alone, they'd wander off. And they are an endangered species, so they're protected by the law. But at the time, we didn't know. I was very small. But the snakes, I remember we would swim in the river. I'd go down the river. I belonged to a gang. We were called the River Rats from North Clifton. And we used to go in the river and swim, and the water snakes would just be swimming by, and it was like no big deal.
You go by yourself, or let me go to the next question. Who did you play with when you were a child, and who were your best friends?
Okay, I played, the first person that I knew, child that I knew in North Clifton was Christina Sislagi. I still remember that I would stand at my gate, and Tina would be out in her yard playing, and I kept yelling at her, little girl, come and play with me. Finally, my mother introduced us, and so Tina was one of my friends. Eva Paris was another one. Patty Luna, Veronica Vialma, and then who else? I'm trying to think. Then we would go further up North Clifton, and we would play like with the Overalls. Not Roy. What was their name? No. We never played with the McBrides. We never went into Okie Town, but we would go further. Like we ended up later on being friends with like Katie Webster and her brothers, and
Was that about the Mercantile?
they had a home up there. They lived by the Mormon church. There was a Mormon church there.
I know that.
In a big lot there. They knocked it down. But I remember I even went to primary a couple of times. I was invited, and I asked my mother if I could go, and she said sure. And so I went to primary. I didn't know what I had a great time, you know. It was like preschool.
Yeah.
And so as we got older, we moved further up into North Clifton. We got to know more people because we were allowed to go further. But basically, those were the people that we played with.
Did you and your friends have a special hangout where you like to spend time?
Well, our hangout was down by the river.
The river.
We'd climb over the wall over there by Eva. Eva's house was right by the river. And there was a wall there, really small, retaining, well, it was a big wall, but it didn't come up too high. And we had a place that we would climb down there, and we would go sit down there under the trees and just sit around and have fun. I remember we got to a point where we were allowed to build a fire, and then we would bake potatoes in the fire. And then, I don't know who it was that had got this idea that we could smoke the dried grapevines.
Yeah, who didn't? The little Ruiz?
Yes, so we'd sit down there and smoke grapevines. Well, we weren't really smoking, we were puffing.
Yeah.
But we thought we were so cool because we were smoking.
That's for sure. So what was your favorite toy and why?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question because I don't think I had a favorite toy. I remember having dolls. I was kind of a tomboy. I remember liking to play with my dad's tools. And I had a sandbox out in front that he built for me, and I'd go out there and with a spade and just shovel dirt. And I remember I had a pail, and I used to get wet, and I would rub dirt all over myself. And I would sit by an anthill, and I would let the ants crawl all over me.
Oh, no.
I used to do that. And I would just be fascinated, you know. But I put mud on, you know, all over myself, and so they didn't bite. And then when my mother found out I was doing that, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. But I loved playing in that sandbox. I loved, Velma used to come over a lot, and Berna. And we'd play out in the front yard. We had a sprinkler, and Mom would put it on for us, and we'd put our suits on, and we'd run back and forth in the sprinkler, you know, and get wet, and sit under the peach tree and have a little picnic.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun for us. And then when we were older, that I would do a lot of exploring with my friends. We'd climb the mountains behind my house.
Was there anything on top of that hill?
I was not allowed to go to the top of that hill. I could only go so far. Some of the other kids that I was with did go to the top, but I only would go so far, and then I would stop. And I never got to the top. So I don't really know. I only know what I've been told. I don't know what's up there. I know that sometimes I would sit up on the other mountain, and it was really gravelly and sliding. It was like, you know, you kind of had to climb up, but there were a lot of little, like, mesquite trees, small bushes. And I used to love to sit back there and just watch everything that was going on, because, like, Mom would come out and I could see her hanging clothes, and you could hear people talking because it would come off it was a canyon,
you can hear it.
off the walls, you know, and you could hear people talking all over the place. And I was fascinated with that. I'd just sit up there and watch everybody.
Well, you were on Clifton Peak or in the...
It was the peak, this side, like
You were
the
on the other side of
waterfall
the
was,
river?
it was right by my house.
You were on the other side of the river?
No,
Oh, you were on the other side. Okay, I know where you were.
yeah, it was right by my house. There was that creek, and then we'd climb up that mountain, and I would sit up there. I never even got up to the top of that mountain either.
Did you speak Spanish or English at your home?
We spoke English at home, but I was always very frustrated because I would hear my mom and dad speaking Spanish, or my aunts and uncles, both sides of the families, you know, we'd go and everybody be chattering in Spanish. And I remember I started having a fascination, and I would just I remember my grandmother, I go say, well, Grandma, what does this mean? And she'd tell me, what does that mean? And you know, I never forgot. It would stick with me. My Aunt Nellie would do the same.
What's the grandmother you're talking about?
My grandma Manuela.
Okay.
And then my Aunt Nellie taught me a lot of words and phrases too that I would hear, because I would hear them, but I didn't know what they meant. So little by little, I started getting a little bit of words and phrases here and there, but I was told that I wasn't allowed to speak it, so I never did. I just listened. It wasn't until I got older that I started studying, like in high school.
Did you have any bicycles when you were a kid?
I remember I had a bike. I can't remember, who was it? Was it a Schwinn? Was it Schwinn that made those bikes? Mine was blue and white with the big, it had like white sidewalls. Mm-hmm. And it was like chromy, and it was blue, and it was white, and it had like a small pinstripe.
Where did you get it, at the Western Island?
I don't know where my dad bought it from.
And then we got ours. I got mine from Western
But I
Island.
do remember when I tried to learn how to ride, he put me on the bike at the top of the hill and just let me go. Let me go.
Down that little hill.
Down the hill. After a couple of times because I would circle around, there was empty lot down there, and circle around and fall, I finally learned how to ride a bike from fear of falling. I don't ever remember having a bike with training wheels or anything like that.
Yeah,
It was a regular bike.
You're right.
Did you do that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you just say, okay, well, you want to learn how to ride? Here you go.
And when you were a child, how often did you get into mischief, and why?
I was pretty much a good kid,
You were a good kid?
except when I got around Velma. Oh, yay, every time. Once, Velma was the idea woman, the idea girl. She always had little ideas that got us into big trouble. And we went through that, especially in high school. And it was always like, I would always get punished, and it seemed to me like she would get away with it, you know. But she'd just get these ideas, and she'd say, let's go do this and let's go do that, and I'd just go along with it. Then I would find I'd be getting punished for it too, you know.
I was going to say, did your parents punish you, and how?
Basically, I remember being spanked once. And actually, my dad was chasing me, and I was laughing. He was chasing me with a belt, and I was running through the house laughing. By the time he got me to spank me, he barely touched me. He was so like, I think it was kind of endearing to him
Right.
that I was doing that, you know. And my mother, I don't ever remember my mom spanking. I do know that when I got older and I started talking back, she started slapping me. She used to slap my mouth silly. And I can only remember that one time my dad, I don't even remember what it was for, that he tried to spank me. And then when I was in high school, he was so mad at me one night. He grabbed me and he threw me across the living room. He must have hit me because it knocked me out. But I don't remember him. I don't remember the force. He must have slapped me. But I do know that when I woke up, I was over here and the front door was over there. And then, no, I take that back. When I woke up, I was laying in my brother's bed. And my dad was sitting there holding my hand crying. He was really scared. He was so angry he didn't realize how strong he was. And he was sober. But I kept coming in late, you know, and it was like 5 minutes. But he kept saying, you know, if you do this again, you're going to get punished. That's what I didn't like about it, the punishments, because they were strong. They were long and hard.
That's my next question. Do you think your parents were strict?
Yeah, they were. They were strict. But I know that it was for my own good. You know, at the time I didn't like it, but I always, you know, took the punishment because I knew I had it coming. I remember one summer, my God, I must have spent that whole summer home because I kept doing stuff I wasn't supposed to do. Coming in late, cruising around Clifton with older guys like Orly Gonzalez and Leonard Gonzalez and who else do we? Those were the two main guys that we used to cruise with, and and of course Velma was there, and I think that had a lot to do with it. And we just get in the car and drive all over Clifton, and we didn't think there was anything wrong with it, but we were not allowed to do that.
Did you have any family chores? What were they, and which ones were your least favorite?
Oh, gosh. I hated either throwing the garbage or cleaning the bathroom when I got older. I think those were the two of my least favorite chores. I didn't mind doing anything else. And then washing dishes too. We didn't have a dishwasher, you know.
Right.
But I did a lot of that stuff because my mom was working and she was very clean. I don't know how she did it. To this day, I don't think I ever walked in my mother's shoes. She was just an amazing woman.
Yes, she was.
An amazing woman. I don't know how she kept us going, and with the job that she had, because she worked on weekends, and it was hard. I missed her because everybody had their moms at home, and you know, I know there was a short period of time. I think I was probably a sophomore in high school, and her mom was able to come home and throw some lunch together, and I would ride home with Bobby Martinez and Eva, and we'd all go home and have something to eat. We used to have an hour for lunch. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then we'd go back to school, and I remember doing that for a short period of time, and I really enjoyed that.
Did you get an allowance? Did you save it or spend it?
You know, that I wish that we got what we needed. We were never just given, like, you know, you're going to get $5 a month or whatever. We got what we needed. If there were times when they would say, no, you know, we can't afford this, or you can't have this. But I never remember really getting an allowance.
What are some of your most vivid childhood memories? You already mentioned some of those.
Pretty much everything that I've told you, the river, the mountains, you know. I do know we had a parade one time coming down North Clifton. Benny Miranda would come, and he was cousins to Veronica Vilma and Molly Vilma and Nikki Vilma, and he would come down to North Clifton from Chase Creek and play with us sometimes. Like, he was the older kid, and I remember we decided that we were going to have a parade, and we said, well, what do we need? So then we went from house to house on that little strip, because I think we only went up like to the Martinez's house for that parade, and borrowing things from people so that we could have a parade. And I remember Molly Vilma was the head, she was the majorette. She had, I don't know where she got this big, it was like a baton, but it had a big bulb at the end of it. And we had all kinds of different things, and we pulled wagons, and we told the neighbors what time we were going to have this parade. And everybody came out and watched us, you know, parade down the street. It was fun. That was a great memory.
If you did that, how old were you? You're pretty young then.
Gosh, you know, I think maybe 8 years old, 8, 9 years old.
Was English the first language in your family?
What? English, yeah. English.
You spoke English mostly around.
English was my first language.
Did anyone in your family play musical instruments?
Well, yes, Agnes and I did. And Eddie did too for a while. We all played the piano.
And what else?
Agnes and I played the alto sax and the tenor sax in the band.
Who was the first in your family to attend college?
I was.
Did you get a degree?
Yes, I did.
What and where?
I got a bachelor's, a BA from ASU in 1969. I know I'll never forget my dad. He wanted me to go there. My Uncle Ray and my Uncle Art had gone to ASU, and that's where he wanted me to go to school. And he drove me up there, you know, unpacked me, put me in my dorm room, and said, "Don't come home until Thanksgiving," and he left. And it took me a while. I used to cry a lot. I really was homesick. But I got over it. But then I finished, and then he just said, you have 4 years to finish school. That's it. You better have your degree in 4 years. So I ended up having to go to summer school a couple of summers. But I did. I got out of there.
Why, did you party too much?
No, when I started, I took too many hours, and I couldn't handle it. So I cut back on my hours.
That was
But I'm not going to say I didn't party. I did, but it wasn't. I saw a few crazy things, but you know, I really had good friends in college. I mean, it was so strange because all of us, somehow it was like a magnet. I remember getting together with people from Miami, Globe, all these little towns. We kind of all migrated. And most of us were Mexican. I don't think we even realized if we were homesick.
right.
And we just kind of, and there were Anglos that were with us too. We weren't, you know, segregated, but we just kind of all migrated together and started doing things together.
Is that the truth? Me
And
too.
I mean, for us, like fraternities and sororities, that was all, to me, I was never interested in that. There were some people from back home that did join sororities, and possibly fraternities, I don't remember that, but I never was interested in that. And then I would see you when I would go home, and we would hang out together, and we'd go to parties. We'd go to boonies and parties up the river, and
The cave.
and we'd go to the cave and cruise around and go up to the bowling alley. Remember going up there and just sitting out there on your car? And then all of a sudden the police started telling us that we couldn't do that. Do you remember that? That we could not, it was illegal. I don't know what they called it.
Which police?
It was the sheriff's office that didn't want us doing that. So then we got the bright idea, well, if we can't get together here, we're going to go out in the boonies. And I remember we would go, like, we'd meet at the bowling alley, and 1 or 2 cars would leave, and then maybe 15 minutes later, 2 more cars, and we'd all end up somewhere out, like, off. I don't even remember, I can't even tell you where we went. I just know that we take one of those roads going out of Clifton, one of those side roads, and we'd all end up at the same place. And we would have a good time, you know. I didn't drink. I want that on the record. I didn't drink. I was too scared of my dad. I did not want to get in trouble.
Who in your family knew how to sew, crochet, or do needlework? And how did they learn?
Mom taught me how to crochet, and I learned how to sew from Mrs. Cosper, from being in home ec in high school. And I made all of my clothes for school for the first couple of years.
Wow.
I had people borrowing clothes from me. Girls that were in sororities were asking me if they could borrow my outfits for certain festivities or whatever. I did a pretty good job. Then I don't know why. I think I kept sewing a little bit, and then that was the first thing I ever bought, was a sewing machine on credit, you know. Remember having those little books where you pull the stuff out and mail the payment in?
Sure.
I bought it somewhere in Tempe, and I tried to alter clothes for a while and make clothes, but I couldn't study and do that too. It was too hard.
Describe any personalities of your family members.
Personalities? Oh, we all. Agnes was the big crybaby. She cried about everything. She was always saying, "You don't love me, you don't love me." My mom and dad would say, "Why? Because you never spank me." She was so good, you know, and we kind of went through a little period of time there where she kept telling me that that I was evil.
No.
Yeah, she would throw holy water at me. She would sprinkle me with holy water, and she would say that I was evil when I got older. Then she got over that, but she was the one, she was the big crybaby. Eddie, he had all his friends. He was always playing. He pretty much kept to himself. I had my own friends. I don't really remember us having any extremes. I did go through a period of time there where I was having problems in school when I was in high school. And it was really hard because the girls were, you know, ignoring me. And I played volleyball, and I remember they used to hide my clothes. You know, we'd go shower after we'd practice, and they'd hide my clothes from me, or we'd be out, you know, on the court practicing, and they'd throw balls at me. We'd go on, you know, outings, like we'd go play like maybe Safford or Benson or Thatcher, I think it was, that we went to in Duncan, and I would end up sitting by myself. It was hard.
Wow.
It was a difficult time, and then finally that ended, and things got better.
What do you think was the financial condition of your family?
I always thought we had money.
Me too.
I never thought we were poor,
Didn't really need anything, did you?
and I thought we were, actually I thought we were well off, to tell you the truth. Did you feel like that?
Yeah, same way. No problem. I thought we were really doing good.
Yeah, me too. I never felt that we were struggling.
How did you celebrate your birthdays? Did you do it together as a family?
We would. Well, I remember having birthday parties. And I remember the last birthday party that I had before I went to college. I had a sweet 16 party at my house, you know, and I really appreciate that, because it was hard for my mom to do things like that for me when she worked.
Yeah.
I remember we were like playing 45s, and different people would have birthday parties, and we'd go to their house and dance, you know, and we would have crushes on all these boys, and oh my God, I danced with so-and-so, you know, and we thought it was such a big deal. And I was thinking the other day, I was remembering that Edmund and Priscilla Marquez had like one summer, they had like a summer party at the beginning of the summer. Do you remember that?
No.
Where they lived up in Chase Creek?
Right. Yeah, I think I remember.
It was kind of like welcome summer, you know.
I didn't know that.
I don't know where they got that idea, but it was so cool. We had such a great time, and all these kids showed up, and we just had a really nice time. But we did that for a lot of things. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't until when I was married to Jaime and we moved back to Clifton in 1975. We had been married for a year, and he went to work for PD, and I went to work for Morenci Public Schools as a third grade teacher, that the Marquez family started celebrating birthdays. And it was like, oh my gosh, every month there was a birthday, because some people, there would be 2 or 3, 4 people that had a birthday in that particular month.
Right.
So we'd celebrate all those birthdays at one time. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember always celebrating birthdays. I remember that. I always had birthday parties.
And we'd have food and just have a
Anniversaries,
really
always had big
nice,
parties and big foods.
nice time, very nice time together.
Did you do anything special on weekends?
Well, We went to church, I know that for a fact. We usually would go to a 10 o'clock mass on Sundays. We would go to the movies, to the Martin Theater. Remember they had double matinees. There would be 2 movies and we'd be there. I don't know how I didn't end up getting sick from all popcorn, sodas, candy, you know.
That's when you see the serials of what's going to happen next week.
And then I remember one time, it was so weird because we had been there all afternoon and all of a sudden the first movie that we'd seen it when we first got there started again. And I kept thinking, where is my mother? You know, I don't even remember what happened or why it happened. All I know is that they left us there very long and I was really scared. I was really worried. I didn't know what had happened. You know, I didn't know why we had stayed there so long. They did come for us eventually, but I don't know what the problem was.
Did you ever go see any movies at night and walk back to your house?
No. I used to walk home from the swimming pool, okay, at night. Remember they'd have the pool open at night? And we would all get together and walk home. And I used to be so scared. Once we passed the PD store in that area up in there, I don't even know what it's called.
I don't know.
Before there was like a little wooden bridge on the side. Oh, we'd get to that area and we would be so creeped out. We'd all take off running all the way up to Poli Montoya's house.
That's where I told you I saw that person in the backseat of my car at that dropped you off at your house.
Oh, yeah.
It was at that place, at that bridge. So when I looked around, I turned around and there she was.
And one of the reasons that we quit walking home was, I believe I was in the 8th grade when it started happening. There was a man in the neighborhood that was molesting young girls. And my mother, she didn't allow, she said, you're not walking anywhere. I'm picking you up, I'm taking you. I do not want you walking anywhere. And Eva Paris and I decided to walk up to Patsy Jimenez's house. She lived up by the bridge going up to Patterson's Addition. And it was a beautiful spring night, and there was a lot of people out. I remember that. And so we felt relatively safe, and we went up there and visited for a few minutes, and we decided we better get on home. And we saw this man driving, he was driving around, and we were scared. So he passed us once, and then I told him, oh God, we better hurry up and get home. And then he came up again up the road. We had gotten close to Paul's store, and we saw him coming, and Paul had this huge mound of gravel by his store like forever. We ran and we jumped behind that gravel, and we were just freaked out. And Eva wet her pants. I'll never forget that. She used to wet her pants all the time. She'd get scared and wet her pants. And all of a sudden a car pulled up, and the lights were shining on this thing, and we were like, oh, I don't want to come out. I'm so scared. What if it's him? And it was my mother. My mother had seen him driving up and down North Clifton. She got in her car and came after us. She said, from now on, you are not walking anywhere.
Well, how old were you?
I must have been 12 years old. What happened was he was asked to leave town. The man who was doing that was railroaded out of Clifton. He left and he never came back.
Do you recall any unusual events such as fires, storms, or floods when you were a child?
Yes.
Explain.
Yeah, I remember seeing there were floods but it was funny because we'd see the water coming down the street in North Clifton, and we'd just get down there and walk around in it. We never thought that there could be a flash flood or anything. Yeah. We were out there walking around in the water. And then afterwards it'd be rocks and mud all over the place, and they'd clean it up, and that would happen again. I remember we went up to Chase Creek one time it rained so hard that the rocks were coming off the mountains.
I bet you could really hear that river at night when it was.
Oh yeah. It was I loved it because it was very calming. I loved having my window open at night in the summertime and the spring because I could hear like the crickets, the frogs, you know, the water running. The what? La Llorona.
Yeah, when I was singing it.
I heard that once and I really was not afraid.
If you would have seen it in the backseat of my car, you would have been afraid.
I think one of the reasons was because somebody told us that what we were hearing was a bird that sounded like a woman crying.
Yeah, they did have those birds. Was the school far away from your home?
Yes. We had to ride the bus to school, and then we had to get a ride to school when we got older because they didn't take us to the high school.
What grade school did you go to?
I went to the Lawrence School for kindergarten, and then I started at, not the Lawrence School, the
Lean building?
the Lean building in kindergarten, and I ended up in first grade at the Lawrence School. Joe Lunt was my first grade teacher.
She was my second grade teacher. I was in first class.
Really? So
That's the first year they opened it.
wait a minute. Maybe she was my second grade teacher because I keep thinking that Miss Shannon had been my teacher in first grade.
I don't remember who was mine.
She was at the Lean building. I remember my kindergarten's teacher's name was Mrs. Crook. But I always thought that was such a weird name.
What did you do when school got out? Just come home?
We would get on the bus and, well, for quite a few years I would ride the bus up to my grandmother's, it would stop over there by the youth center. And then we'd all get off the bus and, well, it was like Velma, myself, Berna, Kathy, Joey, you know, we'd all walk together up to my grandmother's, to our homes up there in Chase Creek.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I guess, you know, there was a time, I loved to read, but I loved spelling. And it was very hard for me because I didn't know that I was dyslexic. I knew that I had problems and I found tricks to deal. And we were always having contests, spelling contests with the teachers, you know, and all year long, you know, who was the best speller. Of course, Christina always won, which is okay, you know, I didn't mind. But just knowing that I was up there in the top 3 to 5 really made me happy. We used to have like spelling bees. Do you remember that? Where you'd stand on one side of the room and spell words, and then if you didn't get it right, you'd sit down until somebody won. I did that all the time.
Was that grade school or?
In grade school.
No.
And then we used to have, I'll tell you, the person that found out I was having learning difficulties was Mr. Meacham. He helped me a lot.
That was said he was mean.
He was never mean to me.
The one that had the finger?
He was missing a finger and he used to go up to the guys and hit him on the head.
Yeah.
And
Good.
I loved him. He helped me quite a bit. And we would have math contests on the board. And I got to where I got pretty good at it. But I would stay after school and he would work with me.
So that goes, do you remember any of the teachers? Who was your favorite?
Well, I loved Mr. Meacham a lot. And then Mrs. O'Neill, she was, I believe, my 6th grade teacher. She was one of my very favorite teachers. I still remember her. Mrs. Lunt, she must have been my 2nd grade teacher. And I guess I liked her because she played the piano, we sang all the time. You know, she always wanted to sing with us, and I loved going to music. I vaguely remember art. I don't know why. I don't remember art that well, but then when I got into the 8th grade, Mr. Mockingbird was definitely my favorite teacher.
What do you mean by definitely?
He was. I really liked him. He was teaching us U.S. and Arizona history. And
You like that?
he taught us how to do an outline and how to take notes. And I just learned a lot from him.
Did you feel pressure in making good grades?
Yeah, I sure did. I sure felt pressured. That was one of the big stress factors for me, was because my dad didn't like us making C's. Just wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And I was struggling, especially with math. I do want to interject something. That Mr. Salas also was one of my favorite teachers. He was my science teacher. I learned a lot from him. He used to take us on field trips.
In grade school or high school?
And I think it was 7th or 8th grade.
Oh, okay. Did you have any hobbies?
I used to collect glass pieces. I was really fascinated with colored glass.
Like little shards?
Yeah. And there had been a house up by our front yard, up this little hill, and I would go up there and I would find all colors of glass, and I would put them in a jar. I guess eventually my mother just threw them away, but I remember doing that.
I remember same type of thing, and Gloria picking up those sharp pieces of glass, and she picked one up and she tell a whole story about it, where it came from, people and stuff. What an imagination! I could never think of it.
Yeah, I would always wonder about the people that had lived in
Me
that house. I wondered, tried to imagine what it looked like, and because there was so much colored glass there, I would always think that they had all this neat, crystal in their home. It wasn't crystal though; it had to have been lead.
Probably.
But I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, they must have had some really nice stuff here.
When you were, do you remember any fads? Fads? When you were a youth, like hairstyle,
Yeah,
clothes?
I remember the poodle skirt,
Yeah.
saddle Oxfords and bobby socks. Remember that?
Yeah.
And the poodle skirt and
Ponytails.
and see, it was hard for me because my hair was so curly I couldn't control it, and pigtails was a big thing for me. I remember I wanted pigtails so badly that my mother finally let my hair grow, and I looked like Pippi Longstocking, but my hair was just sticking out like that. When I saw myself, I said, cut it off. I made her cut my hair. Because my hair was just too curly to do that kind of stuff. I remember when we were younger, all the little girls like Sylvia and Lulu and Velma, Sylvia's grandmother, Sofia Castañeda, she used to roll the girls' hair with a pencil and these little rags. She'd make, I don't know how she did it, and she'd tie the curl, and they'd be walking around with rags until their hair dried. Then they'd take the rags out and they would have long, long curls. You remember seeing girls like that?
Yeah.
And I never was able to do that. And then I remember when we got into high school, skirts started getting a little bit shorter, and we were wearing tight skirts. Remember that? And my dad was always checking me. He kept saying, I don't want that skirt too short or too tight. If he didn't like it, he'd make me take it off. I was only allowed to wear a skirt right above my knee,
Yeah, that's good.
And then that was a big thing, tight skirts and sweaters, and trying to think if there was anything else that stands out, like, I really can't. I think we started watching Bandstand in high school and trying to imitate the girls that we saw on Bandstand, the styles that they were wearing. But really, they're very conservative when you think about how girls dress today. We couldn't wear pants to school. I never wore a pair of pants to school
I don't think it was
at
like
all when I was in school, and all the way through my senior year. I don't ever remember wearing a pair of pants, jeans, or anything like that.
No, that's true. That's true. What were some of your favorite foods when you were a kid, and then further up?
Well, I loved enchiladas. Oh, they were to die for. My grandmother made them. There was a point in time there where we could not eat meat at all on Friday. So Friday was either going to be some kind of fish sticks, enchiladas. They used to make those little, I forget what they're called.
Enchiladas?
No, it was like a, geez, my mind went, you would make it, you would whip up an egg white, and then you would mix in this powdered shrimp. Do you remember the powder? The shrimp would be powdery, and then you would fold in an egg, and then you would spoon out these little patties and fry them. And we would eat that with like rice and beans during the Lent period. I loved eating. In fact, I used to make them in my house. My kids just weren't that excited about fish. But those were enchiladas were my very favorite, and I love tacos. My Aunt Teresa, everybody calls her Chapita, she used to make some really good tacos. I loved eating her food. She was a good cook, but my grandma was too. My mom was too, was a good cook too, but she didn't cook a lot of Mexican food. It wasn't until I went away to college that she started making Mexican food.
What kind of enchiladas? What was that? What were on your enchiladas?
Just cheese and onions, you know,
Yeah,
like cheddar cheese and onions. And my grandma used to fry an egg and put it on top of it. She used to make stacks. She used to make stacks, and then she'd put a fried egg on top.
I'm going to stop on the way home and buy enchiladas.
Doesn't it sound, that sounds so good. My mouth is watering. Tacos, hamburgers. I loved having hamburgers. You know, the thing was, we were not allowed to eat a lot of that stuff. My mother was really, she used to make menus, and she'd have, we had well-balanced meals.
Yes, portions.
And so a hamburger really was a treat. I remember I was so excited because when she finally said, well, you can stay at school, and we would walk down the hill to Maud's, and we would just order a big plate of fries with the secret sauce, with the Guzzo secret chili sauce.
But they still talk about it.
Yeah, and that's what we would have, and a soda, and boy, I thought I was in heaven. But then, you know, it got old. My kids did the same thing when they were in high school with pizza. But those were two of my most favorite foods.
As a youngster, what was your favorite sports?
Baseball.
Baseball.
We played baseball every day in the spring after school in that open lot by my house with all the kids in the neighborhood. And in the summertime, we would wait till the sun started coming down, and it would cool off. We'd go out there and play. Well, actually, it was softball, and we would play every day. And my dad had gotten us some equipment so that we could get out there and play, and he'd keep it stored at his house. Sometimes the kids would come up and ask him for it, you know, if I couldn't go. And baseball was a big thing. I remember going to watch the Renegades play at the field, the Clifton baseball field, and it was so weird. That's how I met Mr. Ramirez, Mr. Martin Ramirez Sr., is that he would go to watch the games. And I was one day wandering around, and he said, why don't you sit down here? And I sat by him, and we started talking, and we became friends ever since. I knew him better than I knew Marty and Mondo, because I would talk to him all the time.
Marty and Mondo, were they Renegades or were they Rangers?
Well, I remember Marty being a Ranger,
Yeah,
but I think Mondo was a Renegade.
I don't remember. I was a Renegade. Do you remember any of your favorite stories when you were a kid? Or we already went through that?
Uh, yeah, but you know, I can't really remember. I know people would tell us scary stories too when we'd go up to your house and be out there in front playing, like we'd kick the can and everything, and we'd all get tired, and then we'd just sit around in a circle, and people would start telling stories. I remember that, and then we'd get all freaked out, but I can't remember any specific. I know they talked about the Llorona a lot, but specifically, I don't really remember that.
Who were your friends when you were growing up?
Well, I was friends with Eva. She and I used to be best friends.
Eva who?
Eva Perez.
Bosa.
Bosa, yeah. And Patty Luna. Then Patty moved away. Then they moved away, and then basically Eva. Bobby Martinez became a good friend. He used to give us rides all the time, and then we'd be out there sometimes just talking down there in front of Christina Sislagi's house in the evenings, and then Andrew Jacobo would come by and talk with us. You know, he became a friend, and I hung around with Sylvia and Lulu and Velma too.
When you were up in Chesapeake?
Yeah. Yeah, we were friends with them.
Who was your hero when you were a kid? Any kind of hero? Fiction or real life?
My dad.
There you go.
My dad was always my hero.
How did you deal with death when you were a kid?
That's really interesting, because I remember the first person that meant anything to me that when he died was my grandpa Liga. I remember him dying, and I remember us going to view his body. And I wasn't afraid. I didn't understand, you know, why he was lifeless. And it was, I remember that I got so sick to my stomach that I couldn't eat for many days. It was just a weird thing that I went through with him, you know.
How old were you?
I think I was maybe 9 or 10 when when did he die? We weren't that old.
1957.
Okay, so I was 10.
Or 58, yeah.
I was about 10.
Yeah.
And that was a very, it stayed in my mind. And, you know, I was afraid of dying. And I still am, you know, and then when my uncle Frosty, Epitacio Montes, he was married to my Aunt Teresa. When he was killed in a car accident, that was even worse. I was sick for days. I was having nightmares. I was dreaming him dead and talking to me, and I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. It was awful. And I talked to my grandmother. I remember talking to my grandma Manuela and just telling her, Grandma, I am so scared. I'm afraid to go to sleep because I dream about Frosty, and he's talking to me, but he's dead. And she told me that when you dream about dead people, that's because they need prayers. And she said, I think if you start praying for him,
That's right.
he'll stop appearing to you, and he did.
That's right. What were some of your favorite songs or music, either as a kid or growing up or whatever?
Oh gosh, there was How Much Is That Doggy in the Window?
Yeah.
I remember that song.
Oof.
And Que Sera, Sera, Que Sera, Sera.
Patty Page.
Yeah, and then, Blue Moon, that was another one. That my dad had bought this big record console, and he used to play, what were they, 38s?
45s and 78s.
78s. And he would dance with me, and it was all these he had all these like songs like in the Mood, all that swing, and then on up. And he would dance with me in the living room, and I remember listening to all of that. And then as we got older, then, you know, it became more, they started developing into more like of a rock and rollish type thing. And I remember somebody sponsored some of these guys to come and sing in Sanford. I think I was a freshman in high school or maybe in the 8th grade. And my mom and Aunt Teresa took us, and we saw like Fats Domino, Bobby B, Chris Montez, somebody else that we saw, and they came and sang at the Armory in Sanford, had a big dance there. And oh my God, we had such a good time. And we got autographs, and you know, it was really cool. I mean, especially like I think to us, Fats Domino was the biggest star at that time.
It was.
And you know, that was neat. And you know, we just there are so many songs I can't even begin to name. All of those songs in the early 60s and on up. I mean, anytime I hear any of those songs, I get nostalgic, you know, because I like them all.
Beatles.
And then all of a sudden, boom, here comes the Beatles. And
oh, go ahead.
no, just I remember buying their album and listening to them and just thinking, oh, they're the greatest thing on earth. And I remember following their music all the way through college. I think by the time I got out, they had already split up.
Probably.
You know. And then the Stones were on the scene too.
That's true.
I remember hearing like Satisfaction, and then Gloria took me with her to Tucson for something. I remember she was already living in an apartment there, and I stayed with her. And she took me to a nightclub. I don't know how old I was. And they kept, remember the song Gloria? And they kept playing that song, and she would get up and go crazy dancing. I was like, oh my God, you know.
And her name is G.
L-O-R. She loved that song. I remember that. And then, you know, as I got older and moved to California, I started getting into different, like, I don't even know what we called it. It was just rock, you know, and it was not heavy metal, but it was just a different type of music, like the Doors and all that kind of stuff. I remember the Doors when I was
Acid rock.
a junior in college.
They called it acid rock.
And like Cream. Then the Stones got really big, and I think the Beatles were still around and all that kind of stuff. But you would go to concerts, and I mean, thousands and thousands of people would be there.
Yeah, just keep talking.
To see who was playing. I know, gosh, one of my favorite people was Rod Stewart. You know, later on when I moved to California, I don't know how many times I saw him perform, and I saw Elton John, and then Chicago, they were the best. But here, you know, with Chicago, here's an interesting thing that this friend of mine took me to. It was up there in El Sereno,
Go ahead.
where Cal State is.
Nothing. What do you want? Go ahead.
And he, there was this little place called Itchy Foot Mo's. You know, it kind of reminded me of the Club 66 on there by the three-way. But anyway, it was this dumpy little place, and we waited forever to get in line to get in because these guys had come from Chicago to play, and they called themselves CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. Well, we went in and danced. Oh, the music was great and everything, and what, a year later, bam, Chicago. It was Chicago that was playing. We didn't know, you know, we just knew that they were big. They were playing nightclubs there, and they became famous. I remember going and seeing them, and we got in for about $5.
That's cheap. Were you ever mentioned in the newspaper?
Yeah. I remember being in, well, for, like when we played sports, volleyball or tennis,
Honor roll.
in the band, anything the band did, when we were graduating and getting awards and things, they'd put our name in the paper, and then for different things like that. And then when I went away and got that job in DC, my picture was in there with an article and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, when I got married, you know, or they posted our marriage. It's so interesting because people were putting like wedding pictures in the newspaper. We never did, but they were starting to do all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
I don't know, did you ever have did you do that? Did you ever put your wedding picture and like after you got married? Like, I don't remember doing that, but I remember that Vasquez did that, and so did Jenny Esparza. When they got married, they came out in the Cabrera and the Courier.
Everybody does it now.
But I was in Jenny's wedding. Did you come home for that?
No.
All these people, we had such a ball. We ended up at the Coronado Inn after the reception. We all went down there and had a good time. Cheryl Swig, what's his name, Ronnie Parra, Ron Ray, myself. Oh gosh, I don't remember who else was there. Some other girls, and we just had a good old time, and then everybody left. And I didn't see Jenny again until Jamie was born.
What?
And that was, I think Jamie got married like in 68, 69. Jenny got married, and Jamie was born in 1977. So I didn't see her for another 10 years or more.
Which high school did you go to?
Clifton High School in Clifton, Arizona.
Did you graduate?
Yes,
What year?
1965.
Do you happen to have any idea how many people roughly were in the graduating class?
50. There were 50 people
50.
in my class. They graduated.
When you were in high school, did you attend any clubs? Or did you go out for sports?
Yeah, I played tennis I only did tennis 1 year. It wasn't my thing. I liked volleyball. I think I played volleyball all 4 years. And then I was in the band. I was in the C Club. I can't remember what else. I don't think I joined a whole lot of, like, I never thought about going to Future Teachers of America, even though I became a teacher, because I kept thinking I was going to be a nurse, you know, or go into business, you know, some kind of business, and I never thought about being a teacher.
I was just thinking about myself why I signed up for all these clubs, because that way when you graduate, you have a lot more stuff behind your name.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem was there was no time for meetings.
Yeah.
Like with me, being in the band and playing volleyball, I mean, during football season, all of my time was given to the band, you know, because we were busy preparing for the games, and, you know, I was a twirler. The last, I think, 3 years that I was in high school, and then we were going and competing in Thatcher. We competed in Tucson, and we got a lot of awards. We were really into that.
So how did you dress in high school?
Conservatively.
Just dress all the time, huh?
Yeah. I had a lot of white blouses, buttoned to the top, bobby socks, saddle Oxfords. I do remember wearing straight skirts and then starting to wear like flats. I remember that first year, all the girls were, when I was a freshman, all the girls, like the older girls, were wearing these big poofy skirts.
With the petticoats?
With the petticoats. And I always remember Carolyn Cueto. She looked like a living doll. And I wanted to look like her so badly. And I remember my mom either made me, I think she made me a skirt and got me some petticoats. And then what we discovered was that I was taking algebra for Miss Myers, and she used to try to whack us in the back of the knees when she would get mad, and we'd be standing at the blackboard, and she'd get that yardstick and whack, and then they would just go doing right off the skirt, doing, doing, and oh my God, I got the biggest kick out of that, you know, because she couldn't hit us. She kept hitting our skirt. And she was a good teacher, though. I learned from her.
Oh, yeah.
She had her moments, but she was a good teacher.
What type of shoes did you wear? You said Oxfords?
We wore saddle Oxfords, but then we started wearing tennis shoes with bobby socks. They came out with, they were making different styles of shoes, shoes with colors and designs on them, and that was a big thing. I remember moving into the tennis shoe era. They were not like what we were today. They were just very simple, you know, canvas shoes that tied up. Nothing fancy, you know.
In high school, who did you go out with?
Oh. Well, I talked to a lot of guys on the telephone. I dated very, very few guys. I remember going to the prom with Tommy McBride, and then I remember going the following year to the Girls League dance with Rocky Robs. What a creep. I went out on a couple of days with him. He just was not my type of person. He turned me off. And then I started dating Ray Moreno. And I dated him all through high school. The rest, I think I started dating him like maybe the summer before my junior year.
I was going to say, how old were you when you started dating?
15. I think I was 15 years old.
Do you remember your first date?
My first ever date? No, I don't. I don't remember my first date. Must not have been that eventful. You know.
Where did you go on dates?
Well, oh yeah, I remember I went to the movies with Demetrio Hawkins. Okay, we had a church function. It was called, we belonged to Junior Sodality, and at the end of the year in May, they let us have a dance, and I invited him to go with me, and then we went out to the movies one time, and I was a nervous wreck, you know. I didn't know what to do. You just, you know, sitting there going, oh, I wonder if he's going to put his arm around me. I wonder if he's going to hold my hand. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. That's all I could think about, you know. I wonder if he's going to kiss me goodnight. I don't think he did. And then shortly after that, he started going out with Sylvia. And so that was short-lived. You know, I don't think it even lasted.
Do you remember any of your best dates?
Gosh, in high school?
Yeah.
I know I really looked forward to going to prom, because I always made my dress for that, and I always was real excited, you know, my dress, my hair, I wanted to look just perfect. That was a real exciting thing for me, but nothing really stands out.
Do you remember your first kiss?
Yes, I do.
Who?
It was this guy named Fred Droz. He was from El Paso, Texas. He was related to the Durans, to Tony Duran and them. His grandmother lived in Chase Creek, and I don't know how we met each other, and he was calling me at my grandma's house, because I was there, you know, in the summertime. Mom was working, and I don't know how I got out one night. It was up there by where Lulu lived somewhere, and we sneaked into this little, it was like a little pathway, and I think if you went all the way up, you ended up in Priscilla Marquez's grandparents' home. And we stood there and we made out for a little while. And I was just so like, oh my God, I'm in love, this and that. He left and went back, and he was writing me letters. My mother worked at the post office, and he writes me this letter, and on the outside he puts, sealed with a kiss. My mother brings this letter home to me, and I'm like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed.
How old were you?
I think I was maybe 13. You know.
Unbelievable, that's a good story.
And Mom brings me this letter home, sealed with a kiss.
That's pretty good. I like that. What did you want to do after high school?
Well, college.
Okay.
And I was looking forward to going to college. I got real excited because Velma and I got to go to music camp. I think we were juniors, and we went to music camp at ASU, and we lived in a dorm, and we ate in the cafeteria, and it was and we had to be at certain places at certain times for different, things that we had to do, and they kept telling us, well, this is very much like what college is like, but you do this for a semester, and you're studying, and it was exciting. That really got me motivated.
Who were some of your neighbors when you were growing up? Where you lived?
Well, the Padillas lived next door to us, and that was Alex and Bob Padilla's family, parents, Mom and Dad. But Alex and Bob kept to themselves. They were both what we considered geniuses. They were real snobbish. There would be times that they would see you and they'd just walk on by, and other times where they'd say hello, and I just got used to it. I just thought, oh no. And then Joe Ritz lived down below my house. They had a beautiful home, and his mom was real particular about who he played with. I thought he was a spoiled brat. I got to know him later on when I was in college, and he was really cool. I really learned to like him a lot.
Good.
And then the Christina Soslagi lived down at the very bottom of the hill across the street. And Patty Luna lived next door to her, and then the Mayhans were next to that. And then the Velmas lived down at the end of the street. Where the dip, where there was a dip, and then they lived right there. And then on the right side of the street, I don't really know who was there. It was weird. It was kind of like, that house was spooky. There was a house there right by the open lot, and these people came and went, but they kept to themselves. It was scary, I didn't know who they were or what they were doing, and all I know is my mom said, don't go over there, don't bother them, don't knock on the door, stay away. So we did.
North Clifton was a pretty place.
Yeah, it was.
All the trees and everything.
And further up, there was the Martinezes lived up there, and then Katie Webster, Bernie Chavarria, the Monseguras lived up further up the street from us. It just, it kept going up, further up from that, past Paul Stores. David Gonzalez lived up in that area. The Francos lived up there. Roberta Johnson lived up there by that bridge. Pat Jimenez, Becky, and Robert Diggers, her brother. And, then it wasn't that Okietown was off bars for us, it was just too far away. And I do remember going to Okietown because there was a year when all these kids they tried out for the Renegades and they didn't make the team. And there was enough of them to make a team. So my dad decided that he was going to have a team. I know he had to go through a few hoops to do that because they had to be in, I don't know what you call it, incorporated or something like that to be on the roster. So he called his team the Sun Devils. And my brother was on it, all the Padilla twins, the Medinas, Manuel Medina helped him. He was his assistant coach, and Kalila was a helper, and there was kids from all over Clifton, the Sandoval's, that came to be on this team because they did not make a team, and they ended up being winners. And they used to practice up there in some. It used to be like a corral, and my dad got permission to use that so the kids could practice. And I used to go up there with him and help him, And then I just found out recently that that corral belonged to one of Tommy McBride's brothers. One of his brothers owned that corral. So I guess he got permission from them to use it. I didn't know that they owned as much land as they did up in Okie Town. But I do remember one thing about Okie Town is that, when we got older and we cruised, there was this little, as you're going into Okie Town further north from my house, you'd go up a little hill, and there was a bridge going to Patterson Addition, and you'd kind of go up a little hill, incline, and it was like this little, it looked like a guard house, made out of stone. It was empty, I don't know how it got there or why it was there, and we'd drive in, and then we'd turn around, come back, and then we'd stop, and we'd yell, "American citizen." We'd keep coming home. I don't know where we got that from.
I remember doing something like that.
And why we got that, but we used to do that. And and it was like, Okie Town was a foreign place. I have no idea why, And there wasn't anything weird about Okie Town or anything. I think it's just because it was so far up, north.
Anna, when did you get married?
I got married on August 24th, 1974.
What did it feel like? You remember the proposal?
Yeah, I do. Jaime and I, we drove up the river, up to the first crossing. And we used to do that all the time, and we climbed some kind of it was like some rocks and stuff. We were sitting on these big rocks that were like kind of into the mountain, and he asked me to marry him there.
Who did you marry?
Pardon?
Who did you marry?
I married James Ruiz. He was from North Clifton too. Everybody called him Jaime.
When was he born?
He was born on March the 27th, 1952.
Describe your spouse.
Jaime was a very, very handsome man, young man, and it was so weird because when I married him, he was very shy. He was a very shy person. Once you start living with somebody, everything, he loosened up a lot, but he was very quiet and very shy and very good looking.
Can you describe your wedding clothes, party gifts?
Yeah. I still remember our wedding. We dressed in off-white. We wore, I designed my dress. I had it made at some bridal shop in Tucson. I wanted it to look like a dress that I had seen in a magazine that had been, it was a Mexican type dress. It wasn't a wedding dress. It was just this dress that I saw this model wearing, and they said that the dress had come from somewhere in Mexico. I couldn't find it. I crossed the border a couple of times. I wasn't able to find the dress. And so I drew a picture of it, and this woman made one for me. And then Jaime bought a suit that matched. It was like an ivory suit. And he rented the shirt. I remember the guys had like the grooms, what were they called? The ushers and then the groomsmen. They wore like a kind of a Spanish style type short bolero, black jacket and pants, and then they had like a sash, a red sash. And then the ruffled shirt, the white shirt, you know, and the girls had a dress very similar to mine, but they didn't have sleeves, and then they had this white, like, it looked like a peasant blouse from Mexico on top. And they all were carrying daisies. Different, I think I had like ivory and peacock blue daisies in their bouquets, the bridesmaids. And then my sister Agnes was my maid of honor. And then she wore the same thing. I was not going to wear a veil, and to this day I regret it, because I really didn't want. I was going to wear flowers in my hair. That's really what I wanted to do. And my Aunt Teresa talked me into buying a veil. And so I ended up with a veil, which I didn't want. But it was so funny because the kids, I don't know what happened to these shoes. But do you remember the high heel shoes that the guys were wearing in? Like for disco, they had, the
Right,
heels were real high.
right.
Well, Jaime bought a pair of like ivory colored shoes to match his suit. With Jamie, when she was old enough, I don't know where she pulled those out of, and she used to walk around, you know. And I would say, you know, you're wearing your dad's wedding shoes, and she'd say, ooh, how ugly, you know. And they still remember that. You know, the kids still remember that he had those heels on from platform type shoes from way
That's
back during
funny.
the disco, that era. And you know, I do. I remember everything. I remember my flowers and everything.
How did you meet Anna?
I went to a New Year's Eve dance with my mom and dad. I had come home. Did you see? Oh, I'm gonna grab this. I'm roasting. I was working for the NEA, and I was going between LA and DC. But I always managed to get home during the holidays, and Mom and Dad took me to the New Year's Eve dance at the social club. And Jaime was there with his mother. And what had happened was his dad had gotten the flu, and he was sick. And so his mom wanted to go to the dance, so he said he would take her. So he saw me and he started asking me to dance, and my mother leaned over and she said, don't get too interested, because he's your cousin. Everybody was my cousin. That was another thing. I would get crushes and tell her, and she said, oh, he's your cousin. You can't get interested in him. So I invited him over to the house to have menudo that night. And when I was walking them out, he asked me, he said, would you like to go out? I said, sure. So we started dating. And we got married a year or two later.
What did you do on the dance?
There were dances that we could go to dances. There were a lot of dances going on back home. By that time I had quit the NEA. I was teaching, I was actually running a bilingual preschool program and a mentoring program for high school students in Wilcox. And I was driving back and forth. Eddie and Renee were both playing football for the Trojans in Clifton. So we were going to all their games, you know, basketball, whatever they played, we would go, where we'd try to follow them. And that was the year that 74, when Eddie's team went to the state championship and they lost to St. John's. It was such a disappointment. Oh my God. We were crying. People were crying, you know, that night. We went to the game. They played at the U of A basketball stadium. And they had done so well, and it was so depressing. But anyway, they did good. They did very good, well. And we would go to a lot of games. We'd go to a lot of dances. Some of Jaime's friends started inviting us to go to their homes, like after a game, and they had parties and stuff. I wasn't too into that, because some of those girls were not nice to me. They were mean, they were rude. Because they liked him, you know, and he was with me. Too bad. So sad.
How did you find out you were going to be a parent?
We had just moved back from Tucson. We lived in Tucson the first year we were married, and Jaime got a job at the mine, and I stayed and finished up. I was at Sunnyside, in the Sunnyside School District, teaching a bilingual K through 3 classroom. Oh my God, that was so much work. And I lived with my teacher's assistant. She was from, what's it? Sassaville. She had been born and raised there. And I don't know how she ended up, she was a really nice lady. Her name was Ruiz. Her name was Ruiz too. Anyway, I stayed with her and her husband till I could finish my contract up. And then we came back, and we were renting that little house over there up by the creek in the corner behind, it was like Nacha Nechi Padilla, and then Mrs. Norty lived up there. She had a house up there, and we were in that corner. And Agnes and David had come home. She had married her first husband, David Weiss, and we'd had a reception for them in my mom's front yard. And I remember that Jim and Verna Bloodworth, Verna's my cousin, Montes, they stayed with us, and we went to take Agnes and David back to the airport because they were living in Boston. And so we went to Tucson and took them to the airport. We stayed with my Aunt Teresa, and I was really sick. I was feeling real bad, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I kept thinking, what's wrong? I feel so terrible. Well, that subsided, and by then I had started teaching in Morenci. I was teaching 3rd grade up at Modoc School. Tony Bowling is the person who hired me up there, and I just found out a few weeks ago that he passed away. He was a very good superintendent. I really enjoyed working for him. Anyhow, I was teaching up there, and I was okay, but all of a sudden I just started getting heavy around the middle, and I kept thinking, well, you know, I exercise, I watch what I eat, what in the world, is happening? And it never occurred to me because, well, I was having my monthly, that I was pregnant. And I don't know what, I think what happened is I only got morning sickness once or twice. When that happened, I thought, I think I'm pregnant. I think I might be pregnant. So I decided, I had a doctor, a specialist in Tucson, and I went to see him, and the minute he looked at my stomach, he put one of those little, like a sonogram type radio, and he said, listen to that, and I heard Jamie's heartbeat. And I was already almost 5 months pregnant by the time I really knew that I was really pregnant. So I went back home to Clifton. We were living in, by then we had gotten a house in Starville, and Dr. O'Leary was my doctor, and he saw me through to the end, and everything was fine. I had a normal delivery. It wasn't very long. Jamie, I think I really started hard labor at midnight, and Jamie was born like 3:30 the following afternoon. Everything was fine. She was a beautiful baby, beautiful. She had the biggest eyes, and her hair was just in ringlets. Nobody had a camera. My mother was so upset. She said, oh my God, I didn't even think about bringing a camera when they brought Jamie out of the delivery room, because at that time they didn't let the fathers go in.
Yeah.
And they were wheeling her down to where they kept the babies at Morenci Hospital. So she was born on April the 24th of 77.
I was going to say, so who are your children? You already mentioned Jamie.
Okay, well, I had Jamie then, and then with James, Jamie was already 6, and we had, you know, been talking, and we thought we should try for another baby, you know, and I had to go see a specialist. I had to have a couple of surgeries. I couldn't get pregnant. So we just finally said, well, we're not going to think about that right now. The minute we stopped thinking, I got pregnant on New Year's Eve of 1983, and I had James on September the 11th of that year.
That's when he was born, September 11th of
9/11 of 83.
83.
Yeah.
How did you choose your children's names?
Well, we knew that if we had a boy with Jamie, we were going to name him Jaime, for sure. And when she was born, I kept saying, well, what are we going to name her? And he said, well, I don't know, you decide. So I said, well, why don't we name her Jamie? And I wanted to spell it like Jaime, J-A-M-I-E, but he wouldn't let me. Because he kept saying, well, if I have another boy, I want to name him that. So I ended up spelling her name J-A-M-I-E. Then when James was born, I had him in Tucson at TMC. Because Dr. O'Leary made me go to a specialist then. He said I was 36 and I was over the hill. And everybody's having babies now, even at 50. But anyway, I was seeing a specialist, and the baby was born. He was born. Jaime was with me. And they kept coming and asking me, well, what is your child's name? And I kept saying, well, you know, I've got to wait for my husband to come in because I don't know what he wants to name him. And Jaime was like, well, I don't know, you name him. He was all frustrated. So I ended up naming James Edward after my dad. And Jamie's name was Jamie Renee because I like the name Renee. And she has an uncle name. It's not spelled in her middle name is spelled R-E-N-E-E with an accent over the first E. But anyhow, because I had a student teacher, her name was Renee, and I liked her name in Tucson. So that's why I named her that.
What did you find most difficult in raising young children?
Oh, I think, you know, just with Jamie, the fact that she was sick and we didn't know, and she cried constantly, you know, we didn't know that she was alert. She couldn't have any kind of formula. She wasn't even taking my milk. I was trying to breastfeed her. And she just kept crying and crying and crying, and we didn't know that she had allergies. And we went through that for several years with her, that, you know, the allergy thing. As doctor after doctor, specialists, and that was hard. That was very, very hard to go through with her. And what made it even harder was all the attention that she got from that. She had become very self-centered, you know, at one point, and I didn't want that for my children. I wanted them to be normal, average kids, you know. And I think what really helped Jamie was James being born, because she turned into a totally different child. Not that she was a brat or anything, it was just that she had so many problems, you know. We had to special cream, special soap, special clothes. You know, she can't wear anything. She can only wear cotton. She can only sleep on cotton. Medicine, and, you know, it was like a myriad of things that had to be done for her. And then I would think to myself, and thank God she's not terminal, you know. And then James was such a good baby that it really wasn't a problem. She was very helpful. We moved to Sierra Vista. James was only about 9 months old when we moved. And we moved on July the 4th of '84. And so also you know, that really had a lot to do with them being more stable and easier to take care of, because there weren't, you know, my mother spoiled the kids a lot. And I'm not saying that that was bad, but it didn't help, because I didn't want them to think that they could have everything that they wanted either. But, you know, we worked it out. Everything worked out for the best. I think the hardest thing was getting them to a babysitter, you know, trying to, you know, you've got to go to work, you've got to get one to one school, you've got to get the other one to the sitter, and then you've got to, by the time I would get to work, I was exhausted.
Okay. What did you find most rewarding about being a parent?
Just having them around and all the wonderful little things that they did. You know, I still have so many memories of the things that they would say or do or react to, and seeing the look on their faces, you know, of wonder and excitement and happiness.
What did your family enjoy doing together?
Well, we had friends, you know, and I think for us, the family get-togethers, definitely, that was something we really enjoyed, with Jaime's family, with my family, you know, both the Marquez and the Morales family. Those were things that were I really loved doing.
Well, I mean with your family.
You mean with my kids?
Yeah, with the
That's
kids.
what I mean,
Oh.
taking them there and having them there with the family. That was so special to me. I wanted to have what I had had.
Yeah, we had that. We were special with that, you're right.
You know, and that was something that meant a lot to me, and we were able to do that for a very long time. We had to take a lot of trips to Clifton to be able to be, and then everybody started moving and getting spread out, but we tried to stay close as much as we could.
You know, sometimes I wonder, I was thinking about that the other day too. You know, Scott and Karen missed out on it, and Donna and Maxine too,
Yeah.
because they were far away. They didn't have it when we had.
No.
Not at all. It was hard, I guess.
And you know, James is the one that really missed a lot, because by the time he started getting older, everybody was leaving Clifton,
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know? And so he would cry all the time. He said, I don't know why we can't move back to Clifton. I want to be there and go up the river and go on picnics and go up the trail. He was really upset about not being able to do those things. It took him, you know, many years to get over that.
Changing the subject a little bit, what jobs have you held? What was your first job?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Well, I always wanted to work. Velma and I got a job cleaning Olga Luna's beauty shop on the weekend, and then we would get free hairdos. You know, she would do our hair for us, and at that time we were twirling, so she'd do our hair for the games, you know, so it was free. And then the next paying job was working at Penny's at Christmas time.
The one in Clifton?
At the J.C. Penney's in Clifton.
The old store or the new one?
The new one, the one up on the highway.
Okay.
That store closed years before.
Oh, really?
I don't remember that being there that long.
It was a neat store.
I think they moved right before I got into high school. I think they shut that store down. But I remember working at J.C. Penney's and working with Parthena Ham. I loved that woman. She was such an exciting person. She just, and I loved, because at Christmas time she would make her hair in the shape of a tree, in a cone, and hang little balls from her hair and her earrings. I was just fascinated every day. I wanted to see what she was going to wear to work. And she was cool. I really liked her. That was fun, you know, taking people coming in and paying, learning how to take layaways and, you know, account for them and where everything went. That was really good. That was a very good experience. My dad would not let me work. Like, I wanted to work. Tila and Trini had offered me a job at the drive-in. My dad wouldn't let me do that. He said, no way, you're not going to be a waitress. No way, no how.
What is your profession and how did you choose it?
Well, I'm a teacher, and I think I changed my mind about being a teacher after my freshman year in college, because I went home to Clifton and I got a job at Clifton Schools for the summer job as a teacher's assistant. And I was working with kids that were behind in reading, and I was so excited, you know, because I was seeing progress. These kids were slow. This was not an accelerated summer school. This was a summer school for kids that were behind. And I thought, you know, I think I can really make a difference. So that's why I went back and I said, I'm changing my whole curriculum. I'm not going to do business anymore. I never liked it. I never cared for it. I'm going into teaching. That's another reason why I had to go to summer school, because I had a whole year of subjects that weren't helpful to, like shorthand and business education, stuff like that.
That'll get you anytime. If you had chosen another profession, what would it have been?
You know, I still would have had to come up through the ranks to become, you know, like a, what do they call it? When you go and you tell people how to get organized for doing certain things, consultant.
Okay.
You know, I did some consulting when I went to work in Washington on the side. We got paid for it. I was with a group of people. We were actually working on our PhD. There was a new program coming out of Yellow Springs, Ohio, Antioch College, where we had all written this proposal, and we had been there. We were gonna get our PhDs through that program, but I never finished. But I was able to do some consulting, and I really liked it. I liked getting up and teaching people, you know, like having conferences and teaching people. Like I was doing a lot of stuff with teacher rights and about the laws and how they affect the teachers and how they affect the students. And I was going to colleges and teaching students, you know. I was doing conferences with high school kids, and I loved it. And I think that that is something that I would have liked to have kept doing if I hadn't, you know, gotten married but I don't regret what I did, you know. I don't regret anything that I did. I'm just saying that I would have liked to do that, liked to have done something like that. I enjoyed it. I loved the traveling. I love traveling. My son James calls me all the time, and he's doing a job where he travels, and I had been telling him so much about back east, and I say, Mom, you were right. I was in DC, I went over here, and this was so cool and so neat, you know, and, you know, he tells me what he's been doing, and he's so excited, and I'm excited for him because I know the feeling.
Who was the person that had the most positive influence in your life?
I can't say just one person because there were different, there were people, and I do want to give them credit because they helped me. Tuna Lujan helped me when I first went to ASU. He was extremely helpful to me that freshman year. And he had told me, I don't know where I had seen him before, he'd given me his number, and he said, I know you're coming to ASU. If you have any problems with anything, give me a call. And he helped me with some things.
Who's Tuna?
Ramiro.
Oh, no, okay.
Ramiro Lujan, Bernice's older brother. He passed away, you know, he's been gone for a while. And then Joe Pena helped me a lot when he was at ASU. He was a very good friend to me. I will always be grateful to him because he helped me with some things that I needed help with. Mr. Sislagi, he offered me my first job. I remember one day, I don't know why it was, that I had come home and I needed to get back to Tempe. Christina was already over there, and he gave me a ride, and we talked all the way, and that's when he said, you know, you have a job in Clifton if you want it. And then he said, what are some of the things that interest you? What kinds of things do you want to do, you know, as a teacher? And I laid it out for him. I said, you know, I'm really fascinated with my culture. I think, you know, that we have a lot of that in Clifton, and I want to teach that to my students. And he told me, you have my support. If you want to do something like that, you have my support. And he did support me, you know, 100%. I think, you know, he helped me a lot. Along the way, there have been so many different people. My dad was a huge influence on me because my dad taught me a lot of things about how to treat people. One of the things that was really important to my dad was that we never forget where we came from, who we came from, and that we should never think that we were better than anybody. You know, my dad was helping the drunks on the street at times.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I remember he used to come home and get a plate and take food to Tommy Kepler when he'd be out on, you know, on the street, and Toronchi and things like that, you know, and he always told me that. He always said, even though you have an education, you know, that doesn't mean that you have a right to look down your nose at people. You need to learn how to wear different hats and treat people, all people, with equality. And that was real important to him. And I think I've learned that from him, that not to think that I was better than somebody else just because I had an education.
True. Of all the accomplishments you have had, which one are you most proud of?
My kids. I am the most proud of my kids. They mean everything to me, and my grandkids. Oh, and I do want to give credit to my mother, because she was such a good example as a mother. I learned a lot from her. You know, she was a good Christian woman with very positive values, and I learned things with her about how to be with my kids, like when we would sit up at night, like on Friday nights, and listen to the radio, and she would make us little snacks, and we'd sit around, and she would tell us stories or read whatever, and I would watch her, how she kept her home, how clean it was and organized, and you know, it was hard for me. My mom didn't want me cooking. She was afraid I was going to start a fire. She wouldn't let me cook. And actually, I learned from my grandmother and my Aunt Nellie a whole lot more. It wasn't until later on that Mom loosened up a bit, but she didn't want me doing some of those things. She didn't want me ironing. She was afraid I was going to burn myself, but I insisted, you know. I made her teach me how to iron. I taught my kids how to iron. You know, by the time they were in the 7th grade, they were ironing their own clothes. I didn't even have to ask them to do that. And, you know, she just taught me about, you know, she had a lot of faith about going to church. She taught me a lot of those things I learned, like my grandmother was another positive influence. She taught me a lot about the Lord and how to say the rosary and what church meant to her, and
What's grandmother?
My grandma Manuela, and the cultural aspect of that, you know, like, you know, we would have chocolate at Christmas time, and buñuelos and things like that, and tamales and menudo, and all how that all fit in, you know, what Christmas Eve meant, all of those things. She was a great influence on me too.
What is your political affiliation?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, we all are in our family, I think.
You know, I'm not going to change. I'm concerned about some of the things that are going around right now, because just because I'm a Democrat doesn't mean that I believe in stopping kids from, you know, saying one nation under God in school, or for people from putting a nativity scene out in front of their business. That's terrible. I don't believe in that. And I don't like the fact that every time that something like that comes out, immediately, oh, it's President Obama's fault. It's his fault that this is happening.
That's all you hear all the time.
Yeah, and I don't think it is. It's all these different groups of people that they don't believe in God. So it's not important to them.
The next one is, what is your religious affiliation?
Well, I'm a Catholic, born and raised a Catholic. I stayed away from the church for a while and went back when we were married and stuff. We tried to stay true to the church. We had our kids baptized. I made the first communion, confirmation, all of that, you know. But then when I got divorced, I stayed away for a while, and I'm back again. But I also consider myself a Christian.
What is different about the church today?
I think that the Catholic Church is trying very hard to be as open-minded as they can be, and to make, you know, the Mass something that people want to participate in, not something that you're sitting there looking at your watch going, oh my God, it's barely 5:15, you know, my God, I got 45 minutes to go, and, you know, I don't feel like that anymore. When I go to church, I feel like I'm really participating, and, you know, like, we hold hands to say the Our Father. We greet each other before Mass starts. The priest comes out, you know, he talks to us. He wants to know, are there any people visiting here? People get to introduce themselves and tell us where they're from. And then when that's done with, he says, well, let's all greet each other before the Mass starts. So we get a chance to see all these people. And I go to a certain Mass, so I'm starting to see people, I'm starting to know people.
Right.
And I like it because I feel like I belong to something. And then after a certain part of the Mass, after we do the Our Father and we do a couple of prayers, we give each other the peace of Christ, so we shake hands again. So it's like we're all participating in this together. A lot of exciting things are happening. We have a Catholic school now at my church, which we didn't have when my kids were growing up, and I really wish that we had. You know, there's a school there. And we have 2 churches in Sierra Vista, and they both have Catholic school up to the 6th grade, and I think that's wonderful. Because we're having all this problem, you know, with charter schools, and I don't really think that charter schools have taken away from public education. They're there and people are going to them, but we still have public education. I think we have some good schools. I jumped from religion to education, but anyway, I feel very, I like the Pope that we have. We have a Catholic channel. I watch that once in a while, and there are some shows on there that are interesting to me. But you know, I also watch like the BYU channel, which comes out of Brigham Young, and they've got some great programs, and I love watching them, you know. And then there's another Christian channel that I love watching too. So I don't feel like I'm just narrowed into that, you know, one category. I went to the Mormon church right after I got divorced. These guys came to my house and they kept bugging me. And I got to tell you, I was extremely disappointed. I'll never go back there. I did not like their service. But, you know, that doesn't mean that I don't respect them.
How is the world today different than what it was when you were a child?
Oh, gosh. Like Jamie and I were talking this morning, we were taking Dominic to school, and she said that he needed to have more activities. Like he's going to daycare right now because it's a school, but like she's hoping that she can put him into a Christian summer camp next year, which I think is good. And then she was saying, Mom, I remember when we moved to Sierra Vista, and I used to go and be able to go to my friend's house, and we'd ride bikes all over the place, and we felt so safe and so free. And I said, even today, Jamie, you can't do that. It's too dangerous. I told her that. I said, it's just, parents just can't let their kids be doing those kinds of things because we don't know anymore. There's too many weird, wacky, crazy people out there. And then I hear people say, oh, they've always been there. It's just that we never knew about it. Well, I don't know. Because the world has become more open and free, has this brought all these people out of the woodwork? But there's been stuff like that. I mean, when we were small and we lived in Clifton, there was pedophilia. We just didn't know.
Yeah, that's right.
I
think a lot of it too is, the media, the Facebook and the TV. You know right away what's happening.
And movies. And I did really when there were certain. I screened what my kids were watching. They weren't allowed to watch whatever they wanted to. I had to know what it was before they bought, like we had the VCR and videos, and there were certain movies that they could watch, and then there were others that they absolutely not, I don't want you seeing. I don't see the need for, I don't like the swearing. I don't think it's necessary. We were watching movies when we were growing up, and we still got the idea. And the sex, I don't think it's necessary. People have it's just gone way overboard. I have been in this last year, I can count the number of times I've been to the theater because there isn't anything decent to watch. They're making a lot of sci-fi stuff though. I've noticed that there's what 2 or 3 of them coming out this summer.
Right now, yeah, there's a lot of them. Who is the oldest relative you remember as a child? And what do you remember about?
My grandma Dicky.
Yeah.
And I remember going to her house and making cookies with her. I remember when she made empanaditas, and I remember being there before, around the holidays, and she was such a she reminded me of Mrs. Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Little round woman with white hair and rosy cheeks.
There you go. Do you have any passed down family recipes?
Yeah. I taught James how to make menudo a couple of years ago. Remember you came to his house?
Sure.
And he wanted to make it, so he said, I don't want you to help me, you just tell me what to do. And I was, thank God, I hate cutting menudo and cleaning it, but he did do it, I know that, and I know passed things down to Jamie. Both of my kids can cook, and both of them are very good at cooking. And if there's something that they want to know how to do, they will call me. Through the years, they have called and said, Mom, we want to do this, how do we do it? Like, Jamie's been making turkeys for years for Thanksgiving. And she'll just say, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And she has her own recipe for dressing. I gave her a recipe, her dad gave her a recipe, and she made her own. And James has made turkeys. James knows, he makes pies. He's been making our Thanksgiving pies now for the last 4 or 5 years. Both of my kids are very good at baking, which I am not. They get that from their dad because Jaime baked and he was very good. He used to make pies. And he used to get mad at me and tell me, don't tell anybody I know how to make pies. Because he didn't want to be teased.
Do you remember any of the memorable moments with your parents?
Oh, yeah. Of Christmas Eve to me was so special. And I remember that with my grandparents, like my grandma Chepa, her birthday was on the 25th, and we'd sing the Mananitas to her. I remember going up to my Aunt Nellie's house, and then up to your mom's house, and I remember, the tamales, all the dishes, and your mom's cookies, and her fudge, her divinity, were to die for.
Then about all the time we used to go camping up a Big Lake.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember cleaning fish too. Lots of it. But it was fun,
It was fun.
the camping and everybody sitting around telling stories, and the smell and the coolness and everything, the ambiance. It was wonderful. And I camped with my mom's family too, up in West Fork. And that, those were memories and picnics. I've mentioned that before, picnics, going up the river, going up the trail to Cherry Lodge and having, I don't know how much the Marquez family did that, because my memories of doing that in Cherry Lodge are with the Morales family. I remember going to the bellotas with my grandfather.
Yeah.
He used to go pick bellotas and piñones, and I remember deer season and us waiting for the men to come home with a deer, and my grandma making deer jerky. I love that stuff.
Yeah, we did that in the other side too.
Yeah, and it was like, and they'd be cooking, and we'd be having a caldillo with deer meat and potatoes, and then whatever, tortillas and red chili and green chili and all that stuff, the tortillas, and I remember them making tortillas, and the smell of the tortilla, cooking on the comal and the beans and all that stuff.
Do you know how to make tortillas from scratch?
I do, but I could never, I'm not gonna lie, I could never get them round.
Yeah.
I just finally gave up. I just said, I can't do this anymore. It takes too much time, and I don't have time. Once you have a kid, I don't know, honestly, I admire any woman that has more than 2 kids, because it's a lot of work.
I was going to ask you again, now where was Jamie born?
She was born in Morenci.
And James?
He was born in Tucson at TMC.
I don't know what's
Dr. O'Leary delivered Jamie.
What do you remember most about your children as a youngster, a teenager, or an adult?
I guess, that's an interesting question, because I remember Jamie a lot when she was a child, but then the different stages that they go through. I remember her first formal and things like that. And then James too, when he was small. But then James and I got a lot closer when he went into high school. And there was a lot of things, like he was dancing with the Ballet Folklorico. And I got to see him do a lot of that, and he helped me. I was able to bring the kids, some of the kids that he was dancing with. I was doing programs at my school for Cinco de Mayo on September the 16th, and I would get permission to bring them to my school to dance and to talk to the kids, and it was neat because they were growing older, and then when they became seniors, they were all going to go to college. And they were telling the kids, some of those kids went to my school as small children, and now they were going on to school to do something. Like one of the girls, and she's a doctor. She was going to be a doctor. She was a friend of James. Another one was a teacher, and then, they all did fine. They did well. And the kids just sitting there fascinated with them, because they're looking at these brown faces, and they can relate, and they can say, I can do this too.
Do you have any grandchildren?
Yeah, I have 2 grandchildren. My grandson Dominic Anthony Santiago, he's 3 years old.
When was he born?
He was born on December the 28th, 2009.
Okay, and your other grandchild?
And then my little granddaughter Mia, she's just a few weeks old. She was born on May the 18th of 2013. About 8 o'clock in the morning. Dominic, I think, was born around 11 o'clock at night.
How do you entertain friends and family?
You mean as an adult?
As an adult.
I think I tried to emulate what my family had done. When we moved to Sierra Vista and we made friends, and people would have us to their homes, or we'd have people to their homes, and I would always try to make a special dish that we had made from back home, you know. I was very involved with Hands Across the Border, so I had people coming up from Mexico too. And just trying to have that atmosphere of family and friends around, you know, with some of the traditional foods.
What cemeteries did your family visit, and who was buried there?
Well, the only cemetery that I remember is the cemetery that our families are, my mom, my dad, your dad, and our aunts and uncles and our grandparents are buried at.
Yeah.
I do,
Yeah, me too.
vaguely, I've been to a couple of cemeteries. I've been to a cemetery when my Uncle Ray was buried in California, and it was so different. And then I've been to the cemetery in San Jose when my uncle was buried, and I know I've been to a cemetery in Tucson, and then not too long ago a teacher friend of mine passed away, and they buried her on Fort Huachuca. They have a cemetery for civilians there. And it was so dry and so dead, and I was like, oh, you know, because the military cemetery is nice. This one's just fairly new, and I guess they're working on it. I didn't like it.
Do you think that you achieved all the goals that you had?
Yes and no. I know that I'm very proud of my kids. I tried to be the best parent I could be. I tried to make sure that they got their education, and they've both done so well. I am so proud of them. And that's something that I wanted for myself, you know, that my dad, he wanted it for me, and I wanted it for myself, and I understand why now. It's you know, because they're doing well, they can take care of themselves.
Sure.
But it also is a source of pride for me. And I'm thinking, my God, you know, and they both have said to me, Mom, we couldn't have done this without you. That makes me feel good. You know, I do want to say, you know, what my kids, you know, my son works for a hair product company, a big company called Bumble and Bumble. He's back east, and he's doing training, and he travels. He does, they're not hair shows, but he shows people how to use the products. He does hairstyles, he does haircuts. He is not a salesman. He's in charge of 7 states, and he's doing very well. He's got his own car. He's flying all over, taking the train, and he has time to sightsee, and I'm very happy for him. He's doing well. Jamie, she's director of marketing at Grand Canyon University.
Great.
Before that, she worked for the Phoenix Suns. She's done a lot of stuff with marketing. There have been commercials that have come out here on television that, you know, she's been a part of, and, you know, I'm proud of that.
So I didn't know that. What major illnesses or health problems do you remember having?
Well, you know, female problems and being told that I couldn't have kids. years ago. That was a real disappointment for me, and then being able to get pregnant was such a joyous thing for me. I think I've been through some things, issues with my body now, and I know it's from stress. I've had problems with my feet. I know I've got arthritis in my hands and my feet, and I've got fibromyalgia, and that was no fun. But I'm dealing with it. You know, I'm learning how to deal with it. I've had a lot of stomach issues, and they never completely go away, but I deal with it. I don't let it get the best of me.
Do you think any of these problems are hereditary, or?
Well, I worry constantly about becoming diabetic.
Diabetic and heart disease.
And I do go and get my heart checked every couple of years because of the heart disease. So far, I know my cholesterol is way out of, you know. But then people have told me, well, my husband's cholesterol is 750, and I'm what? I didn't even know it can't go that high.
I mean, it's some triglycerides will get that high.
What's the highest it can go?
I really don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Well, I know somebody gave me some outrageous number, and I was like, I don't think I heard that right.
I'll look it up.
But, you know, I do try to watch what I eat. I do notice though, and every time I eat something sweet, I think of Grandma Chepa, you know, because she was always walking around trying to sneak goodies off the tables, you know.
Anything she can find.
And I think about her all the time, and I think, oh gosh.
Oh, your dad diabetic too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
my dad became a diabetic. And I know that, you know, my levels aren't that great, but I also know when to stop. I also, you know, I wasn't ever a big sweet eater, but now I really crave it.
Well, it's not basically sweet, it's like, watch for the carbohydrates.
I know, and I do take pills for that. I get them at the health food store and to help cut the carbs. But also then the thing is the cholesterol and the meat, the eating of the kinds of foods that make your cholesterol worse. So for me, when I go have a plate of cheese enchiladas, it's a real treat because I don't do that all the time. I know that I can't.
When I get home, I'm going to order some on the way home.
Where do you get them?
I'll get them from Via Luna. It's a place right down the road from where I work.
What's it called?
Via Luna.
Via Luna. Via Luna.
Via Luna.
Via Luna, what the heck is he
talking about? Via Luna. Valley. Valley of the moon.
Oh.
Via.
Valle.
Yeah.
Valley is pronounced Valle.
Via.
Valle.
Yeah.
Valle.
Have you ever been the victim of a crime? No?
Not really. I can't think of, not really.
Well, they broke into my house, and that's why then they stole a car.
Yesterday, James' house was broken into here in Phoenix.
Who?
James. He's still paying rent on the house here in Phoenix, and somebody broke in and stole their widescreen television set. He was pretty upset about that. But they live in a bad neighborhood, you know. I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying it's. They must have noticed that he wasn't. You know, you know how people watch your home?
Sure.
They must have noticed that there weren't two people there anymore. That's what I think.
One of the last things here, right now, and I stop there for a minute. What is the one thing you want people to remember about you?
I just, you know, I want people to remember that I was as good a person as I could be. That's what I want. I want in my field, you know, of education, being a teacher, I want people to remember, you know, and I get thanked all the time. That's the thing about being in Sierra Vista, because I was there for 19 years as a teacher. I run into my students all the time, and I am so happy, and that's my reward. I'm proud because I have kids coming up, and I've got kids that have become teachers, and one girl, she's working on her PhD. You know, these are kids that didn't speak a word of English when they came to me in kindergarten, and you know, they're in the armed forces, and they're getting their education like that, and they're working in businesses and doing some really great things, and that's a reward for me, and I feel good when they thank me, when I run into the parents and they say, I want to thank you, you helped my children, you know, and that's what I want to be remembered for. Like people back home, they're not going to know that because I've been gone for so long. I mean, except for I will say that I do run into some of my old students once in a while, and they'll always tell me, you were the best teacher I ever had, you know, from back home. I was in Clifton for a year, and I still see my students that I had then. I was up in Morenci for 8 years, and I hope that I was as good a teacher as I could possibly be, you know, and that they learned something from me, and I would like to be remembered for that. But being a good person, I realized a few years ago that I wasn't as good a person as I should be, and I'm trying. I'm working on it. You know, just being a good person and.
You want a good person in what area?
A good, a Christian person. My religion means a lot to me. The Lord means a lot to me. I'm not going to go around preaching to anybody, but I know how I feel about that, and that I try to do good Christian things, like trying to give as much money as I can to the poor through my church, you know, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are hungry and homeless, and people who are sick and have nobody. I try to do what I can, you know, for that, to be compassionate and care about other people. But it gets to be, it's so hard sometimes, because that's like, you know, when you have a phone, everybody calls you and everybody wants money, and you just can't give it to everybody. You can't.
Nope.
You know, I think, gosh, I wish I was a millionaire and maybe I could help more people. But I want to, you know, try to be as good a person as I can be there, because I'm fortunate, you know, and a lot of people aren't. And I hope that my kids have learned that from me too. You know, I know, I see it more in James, but you got to understand, I spend more time with him, with James, my son. He's a very good, compassionate human being, and I really, you know, it touches my heart to see that in him. And with Jamie, I don't spend as much time with her. I know that she's an excellent mother. She's a super good wife, you know. She keeps this house clean all by herself, and it's huge.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that she's doing some good things, but I don't spend as much time with her. But I watch what she's doing with her baby and with her son, and she's doing a good job. That's important to me, you know. And I'm always talking about my parents and my family to them. Your grandma did this, or your grandpa did this, your great-grandmother did this or that. Like now that I'm on Facebook, and I was showing Jamie a picture, I said, these people are your cousins. I want them to know who they're related to.
It's true.
That's why it really bugs me, because I know that we have family in the Marquez side. I just don't know who they are. Through my grandmother, especially knowing that she came from New Mexico, there has to be people out there that are related to us. You know, I'd like to know who they are. And we don't know that. I know more people through my mother's side of the family than I do through the Marquez family. I just don't know. And I don't know if anybody else knows who they are either.
No, the only one that did a lot of follow up was Art. That's too bad, you know, can't follow it up. I don't know if there's any of his kids know it.
Did he ever go to Chihuahua though?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know, I'm
Oh, yeah,
asking.
he went to Chihuahua. It's there in some of those pictures that we have in that family reunion thing that we did. They're from Chihuahua, and he took them.
Like, are you talking about group pictures of our family from down there?
Yeah, in their old, in front of their old houses.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
type of stuff.
He took those pictures?
Yeah, he's the one that did
Oh, I
that.
didn't know that.
Yeah, he went down there.
That's neat.
Anna, I'm done. Anything else you want to say? Bring up?
No, I just, to whoever sees this, hope it was helpful. I love my family, all of them, very dearly. It's just like I told a friend of mine recently, you know, blood is blood, and it's always going to be like that.
I still have more questions to ask you, but I'm not going to do it today.
Okay,
I'll catch you down in Sierra Vista because I want to take my son down there
okay.
and stay in Bisbee, find a ghost in the old Copper Queen or whatever.
Oh, the ghost at the Copper Queen Hotel?
You bet. All right.